Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1108 of the War News stream. And we have massive news today coming out of Poland. They are currently seeking nuclear weapons, and they've begun a military-style draft to start training new forces. Also, North Korea is threatening to attack U.S. forces directly over upcoming military drills, and also a massive U.S.-Iran escalation is expected very soon, as announced today by the U.S. government. And it's good to see you all once again.
And, of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear of massive developments from quite literally every single area. As we have been able to hear that it appears that the Syrian civil war in its second day, the second civil war, is in full swing. We do not have any video footage of that due to it all being largely, for the large part, graphic war crimes. But we also have been able to see that the Israelis have been conducting large airstrikes within the areas of southern Lebanon against Hezbollah forces once again, as they are attempting to once again drive out the pro-Iranian proxy forces from the southern regions of the country. We have also been able to hear that the state of Ukraine today and the armed forces of Ukraine have declared a major victory within the city of Toretsk, liberating all of it except for its very slither of the western suburbs that connect Toretsk to the towns of Pivchine and also Zalizhny to its east. We have also been able to hear that at the exact same time, unfortunate tragedy has struck the Ukrainian armed forces within the Kursk region, as a Russian spearhead was able to break through near to the village of Ulanok, and it's made its way almost entirely to the Ukrainian border. At this moment, we have been able to hear that there are rumors that the Ukrainian armed forces may be preparing to abandon their Kursk offensive and then divert their forces into another direction. We have also been able to hear at the same time that the Ukrainian armed forces have conducted significant attacks across the entirety of the Russian Federation, once again hitting a major arms factory within Starodub in the Bryansk Oblast, and at the exact same time, Ukrainian armed forces have continued to make incredibly large gains within the area Pokrovsk and Toretsk, as well as Chasiv Yar, as I choke on my spit right there. Not an incredibly great thing to do at the beginning. We have been able to hear that the Polish Republic is now beginning to mobilize. We are now hearing that they are going to be mandating that all able-bodied males of military age will be trained for military service effective immediately, while at the exact same time, we've also been able to hear that Poland is considering the idea of nuclearization, given the fact that currently it appears that the situation in Eastern Europe is becoming incredibly tense. At the exact same time, we've been able to hear that the United States announced today that they're going to be withdrawing U.S. forces from Western Europe and then redeploying them into Eastern Europe, meaning that they're still in Europe. I don't know why it was worded that way. But moving on from that, we were also able to hear that France and the United Kingdom are still providing a large amount of intelligence to the state of Ukraine to help them out with their wartime fighting abilities. And at the exact same time, we have been able to get news from the United States of America that while supposedly information sharing was completely cut off with the state of Ukraine, there actually is still a large amount of intelligence that the United States of America is providing to the state of Ukraine at this point in the conflict. We have an insanely high amount of news today, and I was trying to belt out all of that as quick as we could, but nevertheless, it is absolutely nuts, the amount of news that we have. Today, we have news literally spanning over the entirety of the world, and to be entirely honest with you all of it is about as large and as important to each other as the next, meaning that tonight's going to be...
Honestly, I'd have to say the biggest piece of news I've heard today that's been really, really shocking is the fact that Poland, and they're not calling it a draft, but once again, they're immediately starting the military training of all young males in the country. And, you know, honestly, to do something that drastic, I think Poland has gotten some information that is quite serious, because for them to take that step, that's probably the most extreme step they could take before a war broke out. So, you know, that's a bit concerning. I wonder what's caused that.
And so moving on into our major news today, we were able to hear about that in just that alone. We were able to hear that it appears that the Polish Republic, through statements from the Prime Minister Donald Tusk, was saying today that they consider their security to be in great peril and that the Polish Republic will be taking all actions necessary to be able to deal with the extremely strenuous situation that they are seeing at this moment. Due to the amount of bulletins that we have on the map tonight, which is about 40 of them, I cut down with some of them, meaning that we're going to be sort of annotating some of those bulletins into a single one. And I decided to go with the one that was a little bit more wild than the other, but we were able to hear that the Polish Republic, through the statements made by Donald Tusk today, the Prime Minister of Poland, once again, also to put this out there is a president and a Prime Minister of Poland. So if you ever hear that there is another person called Andrzej Duda, that is the president of the Polish Republic. Donald Tusk is the Prime Minister of the Polish Republic. So two entirely separate people with two entirely separate positions inside of the government. But nevertheless, we were able to hear that Poland is considering the idea of nuclearization at this point, and we've also been able to hear on top of that Poland will now begin the training of all military age able-bodied males throughout the entirety of Poland to prepare them for pretty much impromptu military service if the time ever arrives that would be needed. We were able to hear in a direct statement today, however, that the Polish Prime Minister Tusk appears to have suggested that Poland will acquire nuclear weapons. The pledge was made during an address delivered in front of Poland's parliament today, in which Tusk called for a large-scale Polish military reserve force, and that, of course, leads into the entire training of all able-bodied males inside of the Polish Republic. This is an incredibly large move by Poland that has been made today, and it is not even akin to mobilization. This is, in fact, mobilization in its literal Oxford Dictionary form in terms of what the actual definition of mobilization is. The actions that Donald Tusk stated that Poland is going to be making today is quite literally mobilization by every single sense of the word. There's no exaggeration to be added there. We're looking at it right now. It appears that the Polish Republic is considering the situation in Eastern Europe to be incredibly dangerous, if not completely out of control. Although we've been seeing that there has been a lot of things going on the diplomatic scene in between the United States and the Russian Federation, and with the state of Ukraine as well, involving the war, it appears that things in the background may not be going that well, for the large part. Because we have been able to see that a lot of the countries within Eastern Europe are still looking and more so moving towards the preparations to get ready ready for some sort of a major ground conflict that may impact the area here within the very foreseeable future. We've also been able to hear at the exact same time that it appears that the Polish are still continuing to ramp up their military spending and military production, and one can easily see that if we went and pulled up Polish military equipment on the internet, there is an insane amount of equipment that has already been publicly ordered as of today, and as of about the past 2 years, that is still being fulfilled at this moment. But really quickly to show you all some of the larger categories that are being fleshed out, or at least the ones that we know about publicly so far, and Wikipedia is a fairly good source of this, we do know that they're going to be adding another 606 self-propelled guns just in the K9PL, and about another 60 or so of the K9A1 to their inventory. These are not the Crabs. The Crabs are a different version of SPG that the Polish use that aren't in an incredibly high number. The best way I can explain the Crab is that it's their version of an AS-90 from the United Kingdom, but the K9 Thunder is actually a South Korean SPG, and they are already planning on fleshing out their self-propelled gun force by a massive percentage. Right now, they only have about 220 self-propelled guns of the tracked variety in service, with about another 108 Danas in service as well, and about 206 Godzivkas. This means that in total, the Polish SPG force, with the new orders or purchase orders that have been made, is going to be expanding their SPG force by nearly 170% in artillery alone. That is incredibly shocking, as a matter of fact. When you really look at any other comparable land force within Europe, or even the U.S. Army, for the large part, the artillery numbers are somewhat comparable to what Poland is planning on having here within just the next few years as they start to pump out a lot of these weapon systems inside of Poland through Hyundai Rodem factories that produce vehicles such as the K9 Thunder and the other main battle tanks that they're planning on putting in service soon. Let me actually go show you all a comparison here in between the U.S. Army and the Polish Army in terms of artillery, what the U.S. currently has, and what Poland plans on having. We have about 1,250 M109 A6 Paladins. And of course, this is simply just the wheeled self-propelled guns or tracked self-propelled guns. We're really not going to be delving into the towed self-propelled guns and everything else, because then we get into really insane number counting and it would take an incredibly long time. But really just to try and show y'all what Poland is doing or ramping up in the background at this moment, we understand that altogether right now, the United States of America has about 1,500 tracked self-propelled guns, and we also have another 690 M109A7s on order. But right now, at the given moment, the U.S. Army, which is the largest and most powerful ground army on the face of the planet, has 1,500 self-propelled guns. By the time the Polish get done ordering and putting into service all of the remaining SPGs that they are attempting to get right now, they are going to have a number around 1,300 or so, meaning that they will only be about 100 or to 200 short of the actual amount of self-propelled guns that are currently in service with the U.S. Army right now. To give a comparison of the artillery firepower that would be able to be levied by the Polish Republic's armed forces if they were to ever get into any kind of combat. And once again, we do have to remember that in terms of power projection and firepower availability, the Polish Republic is actually going to be able to concentrate a lot more of their firepower within a concentrated area compared to the United States of America. Considering that everything would remain the same right now, at least on the diplomatic standing of the U.S. being in NATO and also the U.S. getting involved in any kind of an Article 5 provocation, we would largely understand that the United States of America would be able to spread out its artillery pieces, of course not all of them, but probably about 700 800 of them across the face of that battlefield that would now exist inside of Europe, and would be able to levy that firepower really wherever they need it. And we most likely would have the industrial base to ensure that ammunition provisions were kept up to speed, meaning that we wouldn't have ammunition shortages, hopefully. The Polish Republic, on the other hand, would have 1,500 self-propelled guns in just the next 3 years. This is largely what we're projecting they will have. They will have about 1,300 of these self-propelled guns, and they will have all of these in service on the Polish front alone, meaning that all of that firepower is going to be directed against Kaliningrad and the Belarusian front and against the Suwalki Gap, meaning that in terms of superior firepower doctrine, the Polish are going to be slamming home insane amounts of artillery barrages in the outbreak of an actual conflict within Eastern Europe. And this, once again, is projected to be the case by about 2027 to 2028. Poland's one of the largest military spenders currently in Europe by GDP percentage. As a matter of fact, the only country that beats them out is Greece inside of Europe. But still, it is an absolutely wild thing to see how rapidly the Polish Republic is beginning to militarize, and not only that, now that they're actually moving on into mobilization as a whole. And once again, we do have to put it out there that mobilization is usually a fairly momentous effort. Mobilization doesn't happen overnight, and usually you would see in conflicts like World War I and World War II, mobilization really only gets into full swing about a year or a year and a half after the conflict actually begins. For the start of the conflict, you're seeing that the most elite and well-equipped troops of all nations are fighting those kinds of conflicts. But as the war goes on, they begin to have to, of course, begin mass drafts, increasing the size of the armed forces and also the available firepower, and also industrialize more so turn the industry into a war industry, producing only equipment and goods for military services and purposes. But it is once again being shown right now that Poland, without a shadow of a doubt at this point, is on the path to mobilization for the preparation of a war within the area of Eastern Europe. And that means, once again, to put this out there, it's a monumental task, and no one really undertakes that without an idea that war is actually coming. As far as the Polish government is concerned, based off the intelligence they've been provided and the diplomatic atmosphere within the region, they are believing at this point that war in Eastern Europe is still imminent and will be affecting NATO here into the near future. And this is leading a lot of people to talk about what Poland must be knowing in the background. Of course, there are a lot of things, and I do have to make this clear, that this channel does not know, and simply will never know. We will never know on this channel the true diplomatic situation that's unfolding behind the scenes right now, because a lot of that is done behind closed doors to make sure that if there was any sort of a wild flare-up in emotions or statements by either party, it's not really known by the public, and the public wouldn't freak out. That's largely been the way it's been for hundreds of years at this point. But beyond that, it does appear that whatever information Poland's getting on the official external side of things in terms of mobilization, they are moving rapidly to militarize. In fact, getting to the point that they are now going to be pretty much conscripting members of the Polish citizenry into what we assume is going to be a short-term training cycle, so that way they will have some sort of minimal proficiency in military service, so that way if a war does break out, they can immediately start to just draft whoever they need into the Polish army to start rapidly increasing its size and competency, or largely military ability. But what are people thinking about this, Matthew? Are people thinking that Poland is understanding that war is imminent? Do they think that Poland is just wanting to take a necessary precaution and be prepared just in case of the worst case scenario is coming? Or do they think that it seems ominous, but there's not really enough info to make a decision on their end? What are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So it looks like 61% of the audience said Poland knows that war is imminent, while 31% said Poland is just being prepared, and 5% said it seems ominous but need more information. And like the enforcer said, this is a massive step to undertake. Once again, they are planning to train every able-bodied male in their country for military service by the end of this year. So they're planning to get on this extremely quickly, and that is a very, very big step to undertake. That is a lot of logistics to get that done. And also, I'm wondering how the Polish people are going to take that, because once again, all the young people, all the young males will now have to report for military training almost immediately. And of course, that's going to cause a bit of a political row, I'm pretty sure. So also they're saying they're going to seek nuclear weapons and nuclearize their country. And that's also huge. So two massive announcements coming out of Poland. And I would say that it sounds like they know that war is imminent. That is not a step you'd undertake, trying to nuclearize and also draft your young males into the military, unless you knew that war was coming up. And also, Poland's getting very worried because it sounds like the United States is going to be withdrawing from Europe and might leave them high and dry if Russia decides to attack. And considering today we just got a report from the Baltic states, which indicates they have intelligence showing that Russia is preparing for a long-term confrontation with NATO itself inside of Europe, I think Poland is getting ready for the worst. And of course, that's a smart thing to do, because it's better to be safe than sorry. And Poland has certainly been the powerhouse that's been prepared the entire time. So I'm with the 61%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm with the 61% as well. It largely does appear that war seems to be imminent at this point inside of Eastern Europe. There are many countries, mind you, because some people in Europe are not really going to be getting this, and maybe it's some sort of a dissonance that they're having due to ignorance. But when a country starts purchasing hundreds of units of self-propelled guns, towed artillery systems, main battle tanks, attack helicopters, air defense systems, aircraft to expand their air force, and then also start to begin practically a mass mobilization campaign or a mobilization readiness campaign to ensure that they could start to draft Polish citizens and ensure that their training cycles are far shorter so that way they can start to build the size of the military much more rapidly in the outbreak of a conflict. All of these actions are what appear to be pre-mobilization or mobilization efforts. Some could argue that this is pre-mobilization, but this largely all does fall within mobilization. Mobilization usually happens by definition right before a war is to begin and right at the beginning of a war. And then once you're into the first year or year and a half of a conflict, by then your nation has been fully mobilized for the war effort, and you really aren't in a state of mobilization at that point, but you're more so in a state of sustainment, attempting to ensure that there's enough reinforcements to keep the armed force at its maximum size, and also ensuring that the war industry is keeping up to its quotas and production standards. That's largely what happens after the first year or year and a half of a conflict, at least historically. And it does appear that Poland is moving down that direction. It is really, in my opinion, without a shadow of a doubt, a necessary precaution by the Polish if it was to be considered a precaution, but actions like these are not taken lightly. Most of the time, governments are a little bit lazy in nature. And what I mean by that is that usually countries are more so reactive than they are proactive. For a national government in any kind of an instance, in any kind of administrative capacity, is ever operating in a proactive measure, meaning that they're doing something before it happens, that means that it has to be something so severe and dire in the mind of the government and government planners that they really have no alternative to sit back and wait and see it happen and then react to it when it actually unfolds. They have to deal with it right now, otherwise the situation is going to be completely uncontrollable when it happens. A lot of people really don't know this either. But there was a lot of pre-mobilization and mobilization efforts that were made in the United States before December 7th of 1941, just to use World War II, because World War II is an example that everybody knows about. Some people always say that America was a sleeping giant, that was an isolationist country at the time and really didn't want to get involved in World War II, but then after Pearl Harbor, it was forced to get involved. And that largely is true, at least on the diplomatic standpoint, but that is not to say in the background that the U.S. Armed Forces and the U.S. government was not preparing for such an exigent circumstance like a surprise attack that would force the United States into war. Pretty much the entire time through the mid-1930s and up until December 7th of 1941, the United States of America was quietly mobilizing everything in the background. Largely building up strategic oil and fuel reserves for the outbreak of that conflict that was to come, and also trying to make sure that their armed forces were reorganized, largely I guess you could say modernized in a way to be able to deal with the rigors of modern conflict, at least for their time historically. Such things were being done for years. Not even that, there was a what's called, I believe, the Rainbow War Plan, which was pretty much every single color under the rainbow was a different kind of a war plan that the United States would be able to execute on if the inevitable conflict that was coming would arise. And we actually did a war plan exactly the conflict that would happen inside of the Pacific and also the one inside of Europe. And so once we got attacked at Pearl Harbor and we officially declared war on Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany, we then rolled forward those war plans exactly, which had everything factored into them. How the home front would look like on the domestic economy and war industry, and also how the conflict would actually be fought overseas for the large part. We pretty much had already designed a roadmap, and not only that, had done all the pre-mobilization and mobilization efforts necessary, so that when that war happened, we were ready for it from day one. And that's exactly what the Polish are doing right now. It looks like they are preparing everything they can, so that way militarily, they are ready to go as soon as a conflict in Eastern Europe began. And also another thing that we do have to consider is that unlike other countries that largely would have at least a shield in practice from the onslaught of the Russian Federation, Poland does not have such a shield. Much like 1939, they are right at the crossroads in between the Western world and the Russian world, meaning that the Polish Republic would take the brunt of any kind of an offensive that would be launched by the Russian Federation, either through the territory of Belarus or through the Kaliningrad Oblast, and especially considering that the Suwalki Gap is on their territory, which is a vital choke point for NATO, considering that that would completely cut off the Baltics in this hypothetical war scenario. The Polish Republic has to be ready to leverage superior firepower from the very first moments of contact in the first hour of that war, so that way they can maintain their territorial integrity and also ensure that they would be able to last long enough for most other European forces from Germany, France, the United Kingdom, and every other country, including Italy and Spain, among many others as well, would be able to race into Poland and make it to that ongoing battlefield. So for the large part, it does appear at this point that the Polish Republic is making concerted efforts at this point to be militarily ready for a conflict that is coming. And once again, I do have to point this out. Pre-mobilization and mobilization efforts historically are very rarely ever, if ever, done as a precaution. Usually these kinds of efforts are done once a nation's government believes that war is imminent at this point. They usually begin the mobilization efforts right then and there. They usually don't just do it as a bluff, because the amount of work that goes on in the background, and also even just the amount of expense to mobilize, is usually incredibly considerable, and for these reasons it generally dissuades governments from conducting mobilization efforts when they don't really believe that war is inevitable at that point.
Also, can you imagine what a political risk that would be to declare this type of situation inside of Poland? I'm not sure how the people generally feel about this, but it seems like no matter what country you announce this in, there would be a lot of detractors saying, hey, wait a minute, I don't want my kid going to the military and training for no reason. Like, there better be a good reason for this. Because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people probably upset about it. And once again, it's better to be prepared than sorry. So, at the end of the day, if it's necessary, it has to be done. But I'm sure there's going to be some people that are probably very vocal about not liking this whole situation.
And also, I saw someone ask a great question. Team Random Noob said, why are they being public about it? Well, there really is no way to not be public about it, because considering that they are going to be putting in all able-bodied males for military service into some form of military training here over the next year or year and a half, but once again, pre-mobilization and mobilization takes a very long time, usually over the span of 3 years, with the first part of it being before the war and the remaining year or year and a half during the middle of a war. So for that reason, there's really no way to keep it secret, because if you start to just draft tens of thousands of young Polish men into the military to go serve, say, a minimum of several months of military training, and then they're discharged afterwards, that is becoming incredibly clear that there is a mobilization going on. And also on top of that, it would cause a lot of public outrage if people started to get draft notices inside of Poland to show up to military bases for basic training, and no one was being notified about it. And that's why these statements today were being made publicized, really to the world, but specifically to the citizens of Poland, because the government, of course, in Poland is democratically elected. It's not like the king's calling on the peasants to go grab their arms and go fight for the king. This is a democratic society, and considering that these representatives were elected by the Polish people have a responsibility and right to understand what the government's doing as assertive actions for Poland's defense, and also how the citizenry will play their role in that matter. So it has to be made public for that reason.
Do you think they should have gone a step further and provided the intel that they have to actually justify to the Polish people the reason why their sons may be going to military training? Because I think it may come out eventually, because once again, if there's a lot of political pushback on Tusk's government, that might force them to basically show their hand and tell what intel they've received. Because honestly, if it were me, I would have probably gone ahead and said what it was to let the people know that this is actually serious. And it's not just us, making a political statement here. We're actually doing this for real military reasons, because it seems like that would have been probably pertinent to say that.
Maybe they could. However, some things may be a bit of an issue with that. For example, the intelligence that they may be working off of may have been provided by a foreign country, say the United Kingdom, France, or the United States, or any other country that has a lot of intelligence. And so for that reason, it may have been provided to them on a classified level or a top secret level. And so they would have to get permission from one of those governments to disseminate that classified information to the public. And that might also tip off the Russians on exactly what our intelligence capabilities look like, whether it was internally homebrewed by the Poles and they got this intelligence themselves, or whether someone else got it. If they start to release information like we have an operative in such and such place in the Kremlin and they heard this conversation happen, then that's going to tip off the Russians that they have a rat at the highest level of the government, and they're going to start trying to suss out the rat, which might end up being more detrimental than beneficial, because then we could see that the rat ends up being caught, or they have to pull the rat out of the Kremlin so that way, he doesn't get found and, possibly imprisoned or executed later on, in a clandestine way, because the death penalty isn't on the books in the Russian Federation. But that could start being a bit of an issue if they publicize exactly the intelligence and information that they have. So really, this is the closest that they can get to saying it without possibly compromising the way that they gathered this intelligence, or breaking a confidentiality agreement that they had in receiving this intelligence from some sort of a foreign country. So their statements today are about as close as they can get to saying we have clear information that war is coming, without saying the exact nitty-gritty details that could jeopardize the intelligence or compromise a confidentiality agreement.
Yeah, that makes sense. It just seems like maybe they could have given a little bit extra. Like I know that it's obvious that something serious happening, because once again, they wouldn't do this without some really good intel. I'm pretty sure, but I'm sure they'll have to give a little bit more detail, because I think they're going to get some pushback and they'll need to justify it. So they'll probably say something, which will give us a clue as to exactly what it is.
Yeah, I would like to see some more intelligence, but I largely understand why they're being a little bit tight-lipped with the exact information. But then again, this isn't anything new. We have seen some other European countries in the past, for example, Sweden and several others, claim that there was a conflict coming and that the civilian population should be prepared in case of the advent of a full-blown war. But now with the Polish actually taking mobilization efforts to make sure that the Polish Republic is ready for this impending war, it's become fairly obvious at this point that those aren't really just statements of caution or warning. We're now seeing that this is most likely an inevitable fact, that a conflict across the whole of Europe may begin here within the future. I would assume at this point, just to put it out there, considering how long it takes for mobilization to actually even be mildly effective, we're still looking at this conflict in Europe being about a year and a half out at the mid-range. It might become a little bit shorter than that. It may be about a year and a couple of months, or it may actually stretch out all the way to being about 2 years away from this point. But usually when a country starts to get to this form of rapid mobilization, we can already start to assume that an actual conflict is not that far away, maybe about a year or two from now. So with that, I hope that does address that well. Once again, a little bit concerning. Well, it's fairly concerning what we're hearing, because a war across Europe would be a third world war. But once again, I want to say to all of y'all that it's not something that you have to worry about right now tonight. We're not like those other channels that yell that the nuclear bombers are flying and everyone's dying tonight. This is probably going to be about a year or two out from now, but still, we're seeing the clear signs that something probably will be happening by that point in the future. But we were able to hear another statement on the other hand today that also was something a little bit interesting. Now, I do have to say this. This is something that I have to put out there a lot, because I'm not even covering most of the statements that were made by the President of the United States today, because they were literally all over the place. Some of them said that we were going to sanction the hell out of the Russians. Other ones said that the Ukrainians are horrendous folks and they ought to give up. Like, there was a million different statements that were made. Some of them contradicted the others completely, so I really can't even work off of any of those statements. But one thing that we did hear today that was a little bit interesting is that there is a possibility at this point that we did hear about, and it seems to be a bit more of a serious one, that some 35,000 U.S. troops that are currently stationed in Germany may be redeployed somewhere in the Eastern Europe. We did hear that one of those locations would be Hungary, but we largely started to hear later on, at least from what I was seeing, that it may be across Poland and the Baltics as well. Not an incredibly large force, mind you. 35,000 isn't the biggest force that can be seen in the region. The Estonian Armed Forces, I believe, is about 15,000 strong, so the U.S. would be moving about 2 entire Estonias into the region, and just to put it out there, Estonia's military is wildly small, but, you know, there's reasons for that. But beyond that, it doesn't appear that it's an incredibly large troop movement, but the fact that U.S. forces would be redeployed from Germany and then stationed further eastwards into Europe is a little bit of an interesting move, and to be entirely honest with y'all, it's one that we really do not see often or a lot. Once again, that's not something that's definitive at this point, but it is something that's apparently being considered by the Office of the President, and that leaked out to the press today. It's leading us to believe, once again, like we've been saying, and this is a fairly complicated thing, so once again, take a lot of this with a grain of salt, that the diplomatic negotiations with the Russian Federation behind the scenes may not be going all too well, or going at all. They may be non-existent. We're not exactly sure. But Beyond that, one thing that I do have to say is that I generally would have to assume that the United States of America may not be dealing with the best of diplomatic scenarios, or at least the one that the president was expecting to deal with by this point right now. And it may be the fact that the Russian Federation is insisting on pretty much absolutely ludicrous claims or assertions that should be given to them as concessions because of the war in Ukraine that even the current administration might not be willing to accept. And there may be threats that are being lobbed behind the scenes by the Russians that if we do not give in to all of their demands, that there may be a larger conflict that breaks out across Europe. Once again, there's a lot of speculation being put into this because as far as we're hearing from the office of the President of the United States, Putin is an angel, and then today, out of the blue for like 2 statements, he was the devil. So I don't really know what their position is on that just yet, but a lot of people did hear another fairly public statement today that was also made by the President of the United States. And once again, I don't really want to make it sound like these statements are what we're running with, because these statements were being made at the exact same time as completely opposite statements were being made, but we were able to hear that the U.S. president did say that he is considering crippling sanctions on the Russian Federation due to the recent Russian attacks on the state of Ukraine. And a lot of people are putting in their thoughts on this, and it doesn't really appear that a lot of people have inspired themselves to confidence in the president's words, and many people are saying that the United States will most likely not continue to harm Russia in any kind of a significant way. Some are believing that the Russian Federation will be sanctioned heavily by the United States, and some others are saying that it'll more so be a slap on the wrist and the consequences will be somewhat mild. But beyond that, what are people thinking about this, Matthew, and what are you thinking about it as well? Because it does appear that many people are not believing that the United States actually would move forward with imposing even further and more damning sanctions against the Russian Federation because of their actions in the conflict so far.
Yeah, so about 44% of the audience said the U.S. will not harm Russia in any way whatsoever, while 30% said the U.S. will sanction Russia heavily, and 16% said the consequences will probably be mild for Russia. And once again, we're getting a lot of contradictory statements. I'm not trying to go on a bashing fest here or anything like that, but it's hard to tell if this is actually a factual statement or was it simply something said off the cuff that it wasn't actually meant. So today we've heard that, once again, like the poll says, that Russia could be hit with crippling sanctions on the Russian oil industry as a result of, quote unquote, pounding Ukraine very hard over the last couple of days. So that was what was said then. But we also heard later that Russia holds all the cards and that the president would rather work with Russia than Zelensky because, once again, he finds Putin to be easier to work with. So now between the two, I don't really know what to say. Also, we did hear word as well that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline was being proposed to be reinvigorated once again by the U.S. president to get that rolling again, to give Russia a new source of income and the hopes that they'll come to peace if that peace offering is given to them. So I would say that generally speaking, I'm not really very confident in Russia being sanctioned heavily. If it happens, that would be the right move because obviously we need to try to cripple the Russian economy as much as possible. And this would be the surefire way to do it. But I'm not very confident that that's actually going to happen. If it does, I'll be very glad about that. But if not, then we'll just have to work with it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'll have to be entirely honest. I would have to be within the unsure camp because I'm not exactly sure what's going on at this point, but I would have to say that actions speak louder than words. And so far that we've seen a lot of the actions of the President of the United States have more so been favorable to the Russians than the Ukrainians. So I largely have to believe that if, I was to move out of the undecided camp, I'd probably say that the United States wouldn't really be harming the Russian Federation that much. If anything, it might be a slap on the wrist, if anything at all, or it might be that there is no response or reaction by the United States to really incentivize the Russians from stopping the conflict. As far as we understand, the talking positions of the President of the United States are very skewed and not really representative of the current situation. We were able to see that today, which is really an exception to the norm, that the Russian Federation was able to drive a successful offensive home inside the Kursk Oblast. It's been a serious enough move that the Ukrainians have been possibly considering a complete withdrawal from Kursk, but at the same time, while the Russian Federation is possibly going to reclaim largely rural countryside back from the Ukrainians, the Ukrainian armed forces were able to liberate Toretsk today largely in its entirety. practically overnight. So with that in mind, it doesn't, and also on top of that, they're still being pushed back in Pokrovsk. So for the large part, it doesn't really look like, on the by and large over the past few weeks, that the Russian Federation is doing well at all on the front lines. As a matter of fact, it largely looks like they're not doing as good as the Ukrainians. And even today, with a slightly redeeming word coming out for the Russian armed forces, because I really cannot deny that they did have a major breakthrough today in the Kursk Oblast, even still, that's coming on the face of them losing a major city that they just claimed recently towards the earlier part of this year, and not only that, being pushed back from Pokrovsk, which Pokrovsk is, by no mistake, a fairly major crossroads within this area of the Donetsk Oblast. Most major highways pass right through the city. So the fact that the Russians are being pushed back at this point in both of those directions, it is showing for the large part that they're not doing too well. And that is something that is leading me to believe that the president isn't really getting a good understanding, because he is stating that the Russian Federation is in fact holding all of the cards and that they really are the ones that are winning this conflict so far. And it just really isn't the case. Now, if we're talking about Ukraine and Russia standing alone, then Russia is actually in a slightly better position than Ukraine, simply because they just have more expendable income. The state of Ukraine has a non-existent GDP, even compared to the Russian Federation. Their GDP is about $178.8 billion, or equivalent to Mark Zuckerberg. The GDP of the Russian Federation, although completely insignificant on a national scale, an international scale, is still far larger by about a 1,000 percentage margin than the state of Ukraine. Meaning that financially, although Russia is at least in the situation holding all the cards, that's really completely forgetting the international support and backing that the state of Ukraine has, that completely pretty much gaps that disparity and pretty much brings Ukraine right up to fighting speed with the Russian Federation. The state of Ukraine, much like any poorer country, has been able to count on a great deal of financial and military support over the past few years from the European Union and the United States. That financial and military support alone has bridged the gap in between the state of Ukraine and the Russian Federation, and has clearly seen that the state of Ukraine can actually hold its own, and not only that, overdo the Russians in some areas of the front lines, and really over the conflict as a whole, as the war has progressed, meaning that the Russian Federation really doesn't hold all of the cards. If anything, in the worst case scenario, this is really a toss-up, or the Ukrainians largely hold the advantage. If we were to look at the bigger strategic picture, than just the lens or microscope that we're putting onto the front lines, in the overall strategic picture, in terms of air campaigns and their their success rate, or successfulness, if you want to call it that, the state of Ukraine has a far larger air campaign success rate than the Russian Federation has had really over the past 2 years of the war. The Ukrainians are able to shoot down most Russian drones and missiles that come in, and while some of them do hit their target, and some of those hits can be pretty significant, overall, the Russian Federation just doesn't really score that many devastating hits onto Ukrainian war industry or critical infrastructure as Ukraine is able to do in reverse. The Ukrainians have nearly a 90% success rate in terms of their air raids into the Russian Federation, meaning that for the large part, if the Ukrainians launch a drone, it has an incredibly high chance of making it to its target and causing significant damage. Over the past 2 years, the Russian Federation has been running at a minimum a 700,000 barrels of usable fuel products deficit per day, which is an incredibly significant number, mind you. And not only that, we believe at this point it's getting incredibly close, or has remained near to the 1 million barrel mark per day at this point. It's an incredibly large hemorrhage that the Russian Federation has been witnessing, and not only that, the Russian economy is in absolute tatters, while on the other hand, the Ukrainian economy has largely been supported and upheld by the Ukrainian government itself and the large amount of foreign support that has been seen. We have not seen many major Ukrainian companies collapse, and we really haven't seen the Ukrainian stock market or banks become wildly unstable throughout the conflict. The same cannot be said for the Russian Federation. So in the larger strategic picture, also adding in the battlefield picture at this moment, the Ukrainians actually are in the upper hand position if Western support continued at the same levels that it has been, which has largely been a fairly modest amount for the next several years, and probably would be able to maintain that position until the conflict came to a natural conclusion where one side imploded or the other. So for that reason, I would largely have to say that I am not entirely sure if the President of the United States is understanding the situation well, because the United States actually did put even harsher sanctions on the Russian Federation here in the future. We could see that that would force the Russians' hand to end the war for economic reasons alone, and that would actually see that the state of Ukraine and the United States as a whole are able to get far more amicable concessions and peace treaty terms than we would at this moment, where the Russian Federation still has a little bit of a fighting leg to stand on right now. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. But still, it is a very interesting thing to consider and talk about, especially with how the entire situation is being understood up there in the White House at this moment, or really up in Washington. But moving on out of the Polish news of the mobilization, there has been something else that has happened today that, while it isn't the major big ticket news that the Ukrainians liberated Toretsk, there was something that has come up to many people. They're considering to be something a little bit serious. I've actually seen that this is a thing that has gotten a lot more coverage than the major success the Ukrainians had in Toretsk today, which I feel is fairly undeserved, because the success in Toretsk really outdoes anything that can happen, good or bad, in the Kursk Oblast on a strategic level. But moving on into the Kursk Oblast, we were able to hear of a major shock really today that a lot of people didn't expect. I didn't expect myself. So far, the Ukrainian defense in the Kursk Oblast has done exceedingly well, especially since it's become largely a Sudzha defense perimeter, and we've seen that the Ukrainians have really only been defending the town of Sudzha. We have not really seen the Russian Federation been able to break through, and we really haven't been able to see the Ukrainians break through either to push the Russians back. This front line has been stagnant now for about 2 months, but just overnight, the Russian Federation was able to claim a major success, as we have been able to see that the Russian Federation was able to conduct a frontline breakthrough and has practically made it to the Ukrainian border, now splitting the Kursk front into 2 separate parts. One part that appears to be around and localized to the area of Guevo, and one area that is centralized around the direction of Sudzha. At this moment, we're not entirely sure what the Ukrainian front lines are looking like within the area of the breakthrough, but it is safe to assume, considering the rapidity of the breakthrough, that the Ukrainian unit in this area may have been completely shattered in the fighting and may be disorganized and in a rout, meaning that the Russian Federation will most likely have the short-term advantage of being able to race forward and try and claim more ground, including turning this offensive northwards and towards the only highway heading into Sudzha, meaning that they could threaten the entire Ukrainian front and this axis of the front inside the Kursk direction. This is something that has actually brought up ideas and statements that the Ukrainian armed forces may conduct a full withdrawal from the Kursk Oblast due to the fact that it largely was, apparently according to the Ukrainian armed forces, and we've largely understood it this way, a diversionary tactic more so than it ever was an actual attempt to hold strategic ground and territory. The town of Sudzha really has no strategic value whatsoever, nor does the farmland beyond Sudzha really have any major strategic value. Earlier on in the offensive, there was a lot of strategic value to be had in the amount of land that was being held. We were able to see the Ukrainians were threatening Glishkovo, Koronivo, and even towns as far up as Kromsky Byki and Bolshoi Solatskoye, with being practically overrun, and a lot of these areas would end up being under complete Ukrainian control and also cause a massive refugee crisis as Russians were fleeing the area. Now at this point, it's not exactly the case, and once again, Sudzha is not exactly a major industrial town, or a city for that matter. If you look at Sudzha, it appears that they may have some industries that are based inside the city, but not incredibly large ones. It appears that they have some form of a grain silo and processing building here to the southern end of the city, pretty much in Goncharovka, which is a suburb of Sudzha. And up in the area of Mirny, we can also see a couple of other industries as well, but they appear to be somewhat small, some of them in fact being aggregate industries, and they don't really appear to have that much of an impact on the war effort. Not only that, but the fields beyond, of course, have really no value beyond the land itself. And at this point, it may have become a bit of a point, the Ukrainian armed forces may have a bit of a point, that withdrawing wouldn't really cause that much harm. But we'll get into that a little bit more here in a second, or at least my reason of believing that, after we talk to all of y'all and see what y'all are thinking about this. Because it seems like a lot of people are thinking that this actually might not be a wise move, and that the Ukrainians holding on to their front lines in the Kursk Oblast may be a vital effort for the Ukrainian side of the conflict. Some others are saying that the Ukrainians should withdraw from Kursk. Some others are unsure and undecided, and some are saying that it doesn't really matter that much at all. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So 45% of the audience said no, they should not withdraw because Kursk is vital to Ukraine's war effort, while 26% said yes, they should withdraw because, once again, it is probably vital to do so for safety. And about 10% said it really doesn't matter. And I would say this, I personally do not see Kursk as being very strategic to the Ukrainians. Like the enforcer said, it was a diversionary tactic to get the Russians basically diverted away from the Ukrainian front line and basically put them on the back foot in the defensive to start fighting inside of Russia. So it's not vital necessarily. But once again, honestly, I would say it probably really doesn't matter. Unless Ukraine gets entrapped or they're at risk of entrapment, then they can probably keep fighting in Kursk without an issue because basically, unless they're at risk, then they probably shouldn't withdraw because if they decide to do a strategic withdrawal back to their front lines inside of Ukraine, those Russian forces fighting inside of Kursk are simply going to then follow them back to the front lines in Ukraine, and nothing's going to change. They're going to keep fighting the exact same forces, just a little bit farther back in their own territory this time. So unless it is absolutely necessary to withdraw from Kursk, I think they should keep fighting it out and not pull back until that moment. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that Kursk, in a big picture, is largely inconsequential. If the Ukrainians withdraw, no harm, no foul. If the Ukrainians stayed in the area, there really is no harm, no foul either. At this point, really the only thing that Kursk is serving a purpose of is tying up Russian forces inside of Kursk and not allowing them to be on the front lines in Ukraine. That's really the only advantage that this is currently serving at this point. Because beyond that, there really is no strategic value in the holdings that Ukraine has inside of Kursk. And on top of that, there's just not anything else than that. It really holds no strategic holding on the ground that they have currently. There's just nothing really there. It's mostly farm fields, some minor industries, and some smaller towns, and that's about it. So with that in mind, there's not really a lot of a reason for the Ukrainians to say, if we withdraw, the Russians are going to get access to some sort of a vital military industry that would help them to continue to fight the conflict. Really, if anything, if the Ukrainians withdraw, they may be cutting their losses at this point, considering that the frontline situation may be untenable and stabilizing the front may require some heavy combat that could incur a considerable amount of losses and also put Ukrainian forces in a disadvantageous position in the area. It's not really serving that much of a purpose. And if we were also to take the idea that Oleksandr Syrsky conducted this offensive with the concept of largely diverting Russian forces away from the front lines back into Russia for as long as they possibly could. This offensive largely has achieved those objectives because the offensive has been going on for about 8 months at this point. And that entire time, we've understood that around 30,000 to 50,000 Russian soldiers have instead not been fighting inside of Ukraine itself, but have been fighting up here inside the Kursk Oblast. And if the situation isn't becoming that good, at least in this area, and with the idea of this entire offensive being largely a diversionary tactic to really draw resources away from the Ukrainian front lines, they've done about as well as they could, and a withdrawal may actually be prudent at this point, so they can make sure that this doesn't end up becoming a bloody offensive, but was more so of a successful diversionary tactic that was able to wipe out and attrit a large amount of Russian resources and equipment on their own home territory, and also distract them from being able to push forward major offensives at critical times last year when this offensive actually kicked off in Kursk. So in my opinion, it wouldn't really mean that much if they did withdraw, and also it wouldn't really mean a lot if they stayed either. So really it's kind of an inconsequential front. So if they withdraw, I'm not saying that they're doomed and it's so Jover. It wouldn't be Jover at all. It would just be that chapter began and end. Technically that would be a Russian victory though. They did end up retaking the Kursk Oblast, but if it's a diversionary tactic, it didn't really matter if it was going to be a defeat for the Ukrainians or not. It was really just about tying up their arms and efforts inside of Kursk instead of elsewhere. Now, I would be
at least if it, since it was just a diversionary tactic. So once again, it was not very strategic. It was just for diversionary reasons. From a psychological perspective, I guess you could say it would probably be better to keep fighting the Russians on their home turf because that puts a lot more pressure on the Russians than if the Russians were fighting inside of Ukraine, which is once again not their home turf. So I guess you could say that maybe it puts a little bit more pressure on the Russian government if they're having to fight for their own territory inside of Russia, which may cause them to overreact or make stupid decisions versus, they're probably going to feel a lot more comfortable fighting inside of Ukraine because they don't really care what happens inside of Ukraine. It's not their land. It's not their cities. If they tear stuff up, it's whatever. But if the Ukrainians are able to keep pushing through Kursk, that would be a big, big, big propaganda blow to Russia, and they can't afford that. So, between the two, psychologically, it's probably better for Ukraine to fight in Kursk, but not at the risk of being encircled, though. Like, if something bad's about to happen to the Ukrainian forces, it's just not worth it. Just get out of there, cut your losses, and leave. But until then, I say keep fighting in Kursk, personally.
I see some people saying something similar, and some people are saying it would be terrible for morale. But here's one thing I have to say, because this is something that is a little bit of an important point. You don't have to win every single battle in a war to keep up morale. Like this is one that the Ukrainians could take a defeat on, and it wouldn't really mean that much. Because some people may not know this, but in the opening part of World War II, especially for the United States lost the Philippines, which was a U.S. territory at the time. We also lost practically all of our holdings, territorial or any other, within the entirety of the Pacific on that day. And we also saw that the entire U.S. Pacific Fleet in Honolulu was reduced to pretty much sunken wrecks outside of the aircraft carriers, which were out at sea on exercise. A lot of people also don't think about this, but the Nazi Germans claimed massive victories in the opening part of World War II, and the morale was not shattered even then to the point that everyone gave up. They took over Poland completely, they took over France largely completely, and then installed a puppet government in the south of France called Vichy France. We then saw that they started to bomb major British cities, and even still, the Allies' morale was not shattered, and the British and the French continued to fight on. Largely, the French started to fight on in North Africa, and we also saw that the Polish people would continue to fight on through the Polish resistance inside of Poland itself, and through the British and French militaries wherever they could try and end up getting any kind of access to a gun or a weapon or an aircraft. So with that in mind, there are major battles that can be lost and morale can still hold, even towards the latter end of a conflict. Like, for example, the Ardennes offensive of Nazi Germany in late 1944 and early 1945, where we saw the battle, and let me think here, the Battle of Arnhem. Well, not the Battle of, oh my God, the Battle of Bastogne. I'm so sorry, everyone. For some reason, I was just drawing a massive blank there. But during the Ardennes offensive in the Battle of Bastogne, U.S. and British forces got pushed back tremendously. It was actually somewhat concerning how rapidly they got pushed back and how badly it looked like it was going. And that wasn't enough to shatter the Allies' belief or morale to the point that we were going to start negotiating with the Germans. In fact, we continued to push home the offensive into the heart of Germany until we actually saw an unconditional surrender, even after it looked like the Germans actually still had us on the ropes, even by late 1944 with the Ardennes offensive. So with these things in mind, while I could see some people saying that it wouldn't look that good if the Ukrainians withdrew from the Kursk Oblast, I really don't think it would play that important of a role. Also considering that the Ukrainians still have incredibly high morale simply because they're emboldened by the fact that they're fighting for the survival of their nation. It's not really like if they lost in Kursk, they go, oh, well, the survival of the nation and myself don't really matter anymore, so I might as well give up. They have a very strong morale incentive for the fact of their own survival, really, at this point, to continue fighting. The Russian Federation doesn't have that same kind of morale incentive because they're largely fighting a war where they're having to, for the most part, go into a foreign country and try and fight it there. It's not even their home. The Ukrainians are fighting for their homes and their people, so they still have a fairly significant morale advantage in that kind of an aspect to eat from, even if this, for some reason, started to cause a significant devastation of their own morale.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%.
And so with that, now that we have been able to find common ground, like, it is time for us to move on from that little bit of the Kursk Oblast news. We will be showing all of the combat clips that we got from the area, good and bad, here in a little bit. It is time for us to move on over into North Korea, because we've actually been able to get some shocking news from this area as well. But before we get into that, Matthew, I understand that we have another question that has been brought forward.
Yes.
About
the
very.
Go ahead.
Well, I was trying to swallow there because I was having a lot of spit building up in my mouth. But beyond that, should Ukraine offer to give Russia to Kursk to appease U.S. officials in a goodwill gesture? And a lot of people are saying that that's a stupid move. So, Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So once again, the question, to repeat it one more time, it says, should Ukraine offer to give Russia the Kursk region back to appease U.S. officials in a goodwill gesture? Because once again, the accusation being lobbed at Ukraine by the United States is that they're not willing to make any real concessions in order to bring Russia to the table, which honestly, it's an unfair criticism, but let's just run with it. That's what they're currently saying. So 57% said no, that would be a dumb move, while 23% said, it really wouldn't mean much to the USA anyway, and 12% said yes, that would be very smart. Now, if Ukraine is planning on withdrawing, it would obviously be smart to at least pretend like you're giving it up as a goodwill gesture. That would just be, just a slick move to make. So they probably should do that if they're going to give it up anyway. But if they're not planning on giving it up, then I would say probably don't do that to appease U.S. officials, because the odds are they'll find a way to simply, basically write it off as saying, oh, that doesn't mean anything. That's just nothing. They were going to back out anyway. The U.S. would probably end up saying something like that in the public, which would be really stupid, but they'd probably do that anyway. So I would say unless they're planning on withdrawing, then don't give it up. But if they are going to withdraw, then at least play along and pretend like they did it for this reason. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that giving it up as a goodwill gesture, if they were somehow able to stabilize the frontline position, would be a little bit silly, in my opinion, because the U.S. accusation that Ukraine isn't doing enough to get the Russians to the negotiating table is a little bit ludicrous. Like, I don't really know how they're even supposed to work with that, because it's not like they can really do anything rather than just give up. So I don't really know what that is supposed to mean. But beyond that, I would have to say that as far as the Kursk Oblast, if they were able to stabilize the situation, I think they're fine. If they weren't able to stabilize the situation, then withdrawing wouldn't be that bad. And then saying that it was a goodwill gesture, that would largely be fine. I don't really think that there would be anything wrong with that really at that point. Because if they're going to withdraw anyways, they might as well try and word it where they get some sort of a diplomatic benefit from the United States, even if they tried to downplay the supposed goodwill gesture. That would just be goofy at that point. I think a lot of people wouldn't receive that too well. But anyways, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. But before we continue on with the rest of the news, and especially with what's going on in North Korea, I do want to make sure that we address some questions, because we actually have a fairly large amount of questions at this point tonight, and I want to make sure that we get to some of them before we continue on with the rest of this news, because we still have an insane amount of news to keep on covering. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so we have some very juicy questions. They're aging like fine A5 Wagyu steak from Japan. So our first one here goes to Garrett Cook, who puts in a very generous $50 donation. And thank you very much, Garrett, for that $50 support. And we appreciate it very much. That's the largest super chat of the night. And thank you very much for helping to keep the channel running. And Garrett said, is it realistic for Russia to invade another country, considering all the equipment and trained personnel that they've lost?
It is a good question, actually, and the general answer is yes, in a sense. And it's a little bit weird to explain, because conventionally, the Russians have been devastated by the war in Ukraine, and it would take them an incredibly long time to build up any kind of a competent armed force. To be entirely honest, I don't really think the Russians have an ability to build a competently armed force. The reason why the Russian army is so big into the modern day is because it runs on relics of the Soviet Union's time. That's really the only reason why the Russian army of today is a fairly large fighting force, at least in terms of numbers. None of their tanks are incredibly new, and if they look new, there is a Soviet tank underneath that fairly new look or paint job. And let me see if I can go show you all that. Let me see here. Let me scroll on down. Let's see. I want to make sure that I can find the tanks, really, for the large part, because I think that, holy moly, thank you so much for the massive support, Lord Cog. Holy moly. Keeping us eating. Thank you so much. But beyond that, largely when we talk about the Russian Federation and its abilities to fight the war, it's not looking that good, and especially on modern main battle tanks. So let's look at them. So they have a lot of T-72s still in service. These weren't even good when they were put into service by 1970 standards for the large part. So once again, not really doing too well there. The T-80, once again, put into service back in the day. This was actually a somewhat decent main battle tank back in the day. Nowadays, it's showing that it's pretty much well behind the times in terms of armor protection, even against anti-tank guided missiles. Not only that, the T-90, which could be argued to be a somewhat new tank, although there's a caveat to that. They don't even have a lot of them. They only have produced about 370 of them, and a decent amount of those have actually ended up being about 100 T-90Ms, and those aren't even really doing that well, and once again, still are largely designed to completely defunct Soviet standards. And also, there's a little bit of a caveat that I have to explain here with the T-90M, is that all T-90s sound new. T-90s are not new. T-90s are T-72s that got a new turret. So they are still T-72s for the large part. As far as engaging them and destroying them, you pretty much do the exact same things that you would do to engage and destroy a T-72. And on top of that, there really has been nothing else that's been incredibly new, that's been introduced in larger numbers, that is competent. There has been 650 BMPs put into service. Some of these were produced after the collapse of the Soviet Union, but that was in fairly limited numbers. I believe that they've only been able to produce about 250 of these post-Soviet Union, meaning that they have less armored personnel carriers that they were able to produce after the Soviet Union than even the British have produced since the end of the Cold War. And the British have not produced an incredibly large amount of military equipment on a grand scale of things. So overall, they're not looking too good. I mean, it's like the Russian Federation doesn't look that good. And on top of that, their military spending budget, for people to diss on countries in the West, and let me show you this really quickly. Military spending by country. So let me see if I can find you all this really quickly. And this is according to the 2023 figures. So before the war in Ukraine broke out, because this is once again 2023, so we're looking at somewhat inflated military spending numbers for the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation was spending about $55 billion on their military annually, which was still a lot for them at the time. And that would place them somewhere in 2023 below France and just a little bit above Japan. And Japan's military, I want to make sure that we put this into perspective and really make this clear for a lot of folks who are listening right now. Japan doesn't even have a military that's supposed to be able to conduct offensive wars. Japan only funds and supports a self-defense force that is meant for Japan's defense. It's not meant to power project or anything. So Russia was spending less money on the military than the United Kingdom was, Germany was, or France in 2023. And their military spending numbers by this point in time hadn't really increased that much, even since the war in Ukraine had begun. And when you think about that, really think about that, people keep on dissing, and this is something I feel like is really skewed. People diss on Britain, Germany, and France for not spending enough on their military, and before the war, Russia was spending less than all of them on their own military. And that once again reminds all of y'all that if we're claiming, because a lot of people claim this, and it is somewhat true, that the British, the Germans, and the French don't really have a full-scale conventional army that's up to modern standard, that is large enough to fight a front-wide conflict, then what were the Russians at? Because they spent even less. That means that they weren't able to do as much research and development as even the British, the Germans, or the French could. And that also means that in terms of upkeep and abilities, they were far lower down the totem pole than any of those countries. And they get dissed on endlessly for not being ready to fight a major conflict in Europe. And even still, a lot of these countries, like Britain, Germany, and France, have come out recently, even after they said that they would support Ukraine and they could be on their own, and said that it would take them several years of ramping up their military spending, even from the levels they're at right now, which was larger than Russia's military spending pre-war, to be able to be ready to do anything in Europe on their own. And so when you put that into the big scheme of things, it really does show 100% that the Russian Federation wouldn't really be able to rebuild a lot after this conflict ends. But with all that being said, it doesn't really matter, because if the Russians started a war and they started to lose from day one, like as soon as they just pushed across the Baltics, the Baltic borders, even if the Estonian army alone just started to push them back right then and there, the Russians can always lean back on their nuclear arsenal. And while a lot of that's probably not even functionable, at least in the actual numbers, because the amount of military spending they do, there isn't even enough money to really upkeep all of those nuclear missiles. Even just some of them operating and some of them making it to their targets and hitting them would cause significant untold damage. And that would be enough to force most countries to the negotiating table to see if anything, in the worst case scenario, the Russians are able to secure a white peace. Or maybe they're able to throw around the nuclear saber a little bit extra at that point, considering how bad the situation would be, to possibly get some kind of concessions. So technically, as far as conventional warfare is concerned, they would never really be able to fight one for the next 10 to 15 years. But as far as just kicking off a conflict to then see that they would immediately threaten nukes and go to the negotiating table, they technically are always able to fight that kind of a conflict as long as they have nuclear weapons that actually are able to be fired and will reach their targets. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you who helped this channel to keep on running, Garrett Cook, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to answer incredibly good questions like that, because the answer would seem fairly straightforward until you really think about all of the diplomatic repercussions and tools, or at least ideas, that the Russians could work with, and then it becomes a lot more of a complex sort of a scenario, and that's why the Polish are still mobilizing and building up, because that's still the likely, I guess you could say, course of action for the Russians, even if they didn't really have a military that could succeed in defeating NATO forces on the battlefield. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. Thank you so much once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to none other than Lord Cog, who puts in a massive $250 donation, a absolutely whopping super chat. Call that one the Whopper, because I'll tell you what, it's the number one on the menu. Thank you very much, Lord Cog, for that support. He said, thank you for what you do.
And thank you, Lord Cog, for what you've done tonight. Support is absolutely amazing to this channel. I got to thank everyone who does it. No one has to, but the folks who do support it, and especially folks like you with insanely massive support like that, help us to keep this channel running day in and day out, and help us to be able to pay our bills. And bills are expensive these days, I'm telling y'all. And I got to thank you so much for that support, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, we wouldn't be able to do this as a full-time job, and we wouldn't be able to report on the news. So a massive, big thank you so much for that. And once again, it's an even larger thanks because you didn't have to do that, and nevertheless you did. I always want to make that clear to everyone that you do not have to support this channel for us to be thankful for y'all being here. We're really just happy that people are here regardless. And also on top of that, I got to say that the folks who do support the channel, y'all help us to keep this channel running, and we are massively appreciative and thankful for all of y'all, because if it wasn't for y'all support, we wouldn't be able to keep the channel running. We really make little to no income on YouTube outside of the live streams, so the fact that y'all support this channel is really the only reason it's been able to keep running for years. So a huge thanks to you so much once again, Lord Cog, and of course, thank you so much for supporting this channel and helping us to keep on doing what we've been doing for 1,108 days. And so huge thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the North Korean news, and then we're going to be moving on into every other piece of news, including the Middle East, and then into the Ukrainian front lines. Honestly, we have like a million things left to cover, and it feels like we've hardly scratched the surface. So we are on to the final question of this segment.
All right, and this one goes to none other than Danny B, who's yet another channel legend, and he threw in a very generous $50 donation. And thank you, Danny, as well for the support, and it's good to see you once again. And Danny said, good evening, Enforcers. Chef Danny here, and when do you think the U.S. would be getting involved with Iran, and is it going to be a joint effort with Israel?
It's a little bit hard to say, actually. It sounds to me like we are actually planning on some sort of a joint effort with Israel. And once again, I do have to say it's a little bit weird. Like, I just got to say, like, I cannot talk about this without bringing this up. It's a little bit weird to me that the office of the president largely says that wars are bad and people need to stop dying, unless if it's something involving the Middle East. Then we can just go around and level anything. Like, it's a little bit weird to me, because I feel like it should be across the board. Like, if we're going to be peace-loving at this point, shouldn't we be peace-loving across the board and just let everyone steamroll us wherever? It's like, why in the world can we get possibly steamrolled in Europe and then not get steamrolled in the Middle East? Like, what's the difference? And like, as far as I see, as far as significance, there really isn't any. But beyond that, moving on from that, because I just kind of have to say that each time I think about that, it sounds like we are going to get involved in some way in the Middle East. But once again, I
was agreeing.
Oh, I thought you went home. I was like, what? I was like, well, you have different information. But as far as I'm seeing, it does look like we're going to get involved in the Middle East. But once again, it's just talk right now. And one thing I have learned from talk is that right now you can't really trust any of it. Like, it could just be talk today, and then we see that the Israelis and America does nothing for years, or we might end up bombing them tomorrow. I really have no clue. I still would assume, just based off the public statements, which once again aren't really a lot to work off of, that we may be doing something in the Middle East here soon, and I believe we are going to be involved in it from pretty much day one. But I'm not really sure about anything else beyond that, because it's just incredibly hard to really be able to guess, or, well, guess with any good reasonable accuracy at this point what exactly is going to be happening. So, you know, It's hard to say, but I still think we're going to be getting involved down there. I think that's a good move, however. Like I cannot really go against it. I think that bombing Iran is a great move, and we've been advocating for that here on this channel for about 2 years at this point, which is crazy to think that this has been going on for 2 years. So I would say that that's actually a pretty decent and prudent measure, and I think that the United States should be involved in protecting our national security interests, and not only that, our sphere of influence within the Middle East and our security assurance sphere. I think that's a great move, but I also think that we should be applying that same kind of mindset and course of actions to what's going on in Eastern Europe right now, and also in East Asia. We're really not even covering any of that today with the whole China-America thing that happened, but today we did say that we believe that Xi Jinping would not invade Taiwan while the current president is president. So I don't know if that means that we support Taiwanese sovereignty or what. I have no clue, but that we said that today, so, take that for what it is. But beyond that, I do thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, Danny B, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to have an official chef of the LSA either, which is, of course, an amazing perk. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and with that, it is time for us to move on into the remainder of the news tonight. And that brings us to North Korea, as we've been able to hear today that the North Koreans have threatened South Korea and the United States, and they have said that they will pay a horrible price over next week's joint military drills. And then we increased the size of them after they made the statement today. We publicly stated that we were going to be making the military drill even larger, so that way we will pretty much tell them to screw around and find out. Honestly, I like that kind of approach. The North Koreans yap a lot, but we are also able to hear today, and other news from North Korea, that the nuclear submarine that the North Koreans developed, y'all know the one, it looks incredibly horrendous, is apparently going to be setting sail for the first time ever, and they said that they were going to be deployed soon, and they weren't going to be restricted to the waters of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Let me go pull up this North Korean nuclear submarine for y'all really quickly. Here we go.
Man, look at that ghastly thing.
Ugh, dude, it's a Foxtrot class submarine, or a Tango class submarine, I believe, that has been modified. And it is horrendous. I mean, it's bad. It's so bad. Look at that. Like, that is just the worst shoddy shit show job I've ever seen done on a submarine.
Honestly, I'm not sure if I'm more appalled by the submarine or the shed that it came out of, because the shed that is being worked on looks like something that was maybe abandoned at one point, but they decided to turn it into a submarine building pen. So I don't know. Like, the whole thing looks crappy.
I'm not gonna lie, dude. What's even crappier are the buildings outside of the shed. Like, everything is even worse looking further back.
Yeah, actually, the shed might be the nicest building, and it's not saying much. It might be the nicest building in the whole vicinity.
Man, you come through here, man, and like, Kim Jong-un and some folks from Michigan have something in common. Both of them say, man, can't get shit in Detroit. Like, because, like, there's probably nothing inside of those buildings. They've probably been ransacked, dude, for, like, the tables and chairs to be sold, so that way they could buy, like a leaf of lettuce or something like that. Man, what is this, man? A Saturn burger? Yeah, but beyond that, a lot of people have been talking about the North Korean threat that has been made. And also, by the way, it appears that I'm wrong. Naval News says this is a Romeo, a Romeo modification. I was saying it was a Tango or a Foxtrot. That's not correct. It appears that it is, as a matter of fact, a Romeo modification. But nevertheless, before we move on into talking more about this sub, because there really isn't much more to talk about than that, a lot of people have been talking about that little threat that the fat man in North Korea has made once again, or as they call him, the fat controller. But nevertheless, a lot of people have been saying that North Korea has warned the United States will pay a heavy price for the upcoming military drills. And a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts. And some people are saying that this is another bluff by Kim. Some people are saying that this is a real red line for North Korea. And some are saying that it's a 50-50 chance that it's serious. And some are unsure and undecided. But Matthew, it seems as though everyone's unanimous on this one. So what are they thinking, and what are you thinking?
All right. So we're really not sure what the heavy price is going to be, but it could be that Kim is planning to sit on a U.S. official. That could be it. That would be a heavy price indeed. But 78% said this is yet another bluff by Kim, while 9% said this is a real red line for North Korea, and another 9% said it's a 50-50 chance that this could be serious. And once again, a lot of people believe it's another bluff, and Kim does bluff a hell of a lot. But I will say on this one in specific, Kim has been yapping about this one for weeks. And it seems like he's really been making a point about this one specifically. This does not seem like an offhanded just remark he decided to say out of the blue. Now, whether or not they do something drastic, that's a whole nother issue. But I think it's a 50-50 chance that on this one, he could be planning to maybe show out. But a heavy price for North Korea in reality is maybe going to be another test launch, maybe, or something like that. I don't think they're going to attack U.S. forces, though. That's not going to happen. If that happened, I would be blown away. So I'm with the 9%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm not going to lie, man. Like, well, let me go look. He didn't really thin down at all, ever, did he?
Nah, that's one problem with being a hermit kingdom is they don't have Ozempic.
Man, really, though, that is a major problem for him. He could deal with, like, maybe, like, the whole world supply of Ozempic at this point. But another thing, man, is that in this picture, he looks like the Sodies meme. You know what I'm talking about?
Somewhat, yeah.
Yeah, he kind of looks like it a little bit. Also, oh, look, they put out a time-lapse of him. Gee, he was fat as hell in 2013. Like, I don't know what was up with him there. He's a little obese. But beyond that, I would have to say that this guy likes to yap, and the North Korean government likes to yap. I'm going to be honest, I don't really think they're going to follow through with it. I think they're capping, and we'll probably find that out here soon. But there is one picture of him that I always thought was a little bit funny, and I'm wondering if I can find it here on Google Images. I don't think I'll be able to. But he was somewhere, and he was wearing like all white with like a southern straw hat on, and he looked like Colonel Sanders but fat. And I cannot find that picture of him on here, but it was hilarious. Also, I don't know why he's holding up that book like that and why the picture's so grainy, but I have a feeling that he's in an execution chamber somewhere telling someone something.
Man, I'll tell you what, this guy right here, I tell you, honestly, like, I think he has gained some weight. Like, these younger pictures of him, he looks like he's a little bit slimmer. Like, I think he's laying on the pounds.
Man, and look at him here, man. Look at him. Firing this AK that has the safety on, mind you. Real badass right there. Do you see that? Like, this is a grainy picture.
Yeah.
The safety is on. And he's aiming, and he's pulling, it looks like he's pulling the trigger. The safety isn't even off. So it's not even
also,
firing.
he's not shouldering it. He's not shouldering it very good either. So if he actually fired it, he's probably going to dig that bottom of that stock right into his clavicle right there if he does that.
Man, I like how in all of these pictures, man, the safety's not off at all. Like, the safety's on in every single one of those pictures. Is there any picture where he actually fires a weapon where the safety was off? Or is it all just pretend?
I'll tell you what. They need to put a safety on that gut.
There's that stupid hat that I was talking about, Matthew, like the little straw hat. Dude, I think I'm kind of getting a little bit close to finding. Here we go. He was wearing this outfit and that hat, and he was giving like a speech somewhere. And dude, everyone was saying that he looked like a Southern planter from like the 19th century. And I'm not gonna lie, they weren't wrong. He looks just like it, like with that kind of an outfit and everything. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that well. I would kind of find like a little bit of the sauce, but still, oh well. We'll move on from that and get on into the rest of the news because we have little time and a lot of news, to be entirely honest with y'all. Also, a massive shout out once again to that other huge super chat that came in from Lord Cog. Massive shout out and a thanks to you once again. We weren't able to call that out because Matthew was in the middle of monologuing, but I saw it and of course I made sure to recognize it right on the spot. Although I didn't want to interrupt Matthew because Matthew was cooking. So with that, we are going to be moving on into the United States of America because we were able to hear that the United States is still providing some intelligence to Ukraine, although we're not providing data needed to strike on Russian targets. Very suspicious. We've also been able to hear that the United Kingdom has continued to provide intelligence to Ukraine without any bars hold, although the United States said that they could not do that. We've also been able to hear in additional news as well that Putin has apparently put forward some possible ideas for peace. And here are some of his conditions. Russia wants to adjust the details of the peacekeeping mission, which countries participate and which will not. Putin will not agree to the presence of NATO troops on Ukrainian soil. So I guess UN peacekeepers, and those are practically ineffective. But Russia agrees that neutral countries, such as China, which we all know is a neutrally aligned country, will deploy their forces in Ukraine instead. I would have to say that is the stupidest thing ever, because that's like saying, wow, we really don't want this incredibly polarizing group of European countries that are truly pro-Western to be inside of Ukraine. That would be absurd. Let's get a neutral country, like the leader of the anti-Western sphere, China, to go into Ukraine. It's like, well, that's kind of stupid. It's like, shouldn't we have, I don't know, I think like a actually somewhat neutral country would be like India? Like, shouldn't Indian peacekeepers be in Ukraine? Because I would say that out of any country in the world right now that is a fairly significant power economically, really the only one I could say is neutral is India. India has about the same amount of relations with their side as the U.S. side. So wouldn't that make more sense than sending the literal Chinese into Ukraine? I'd like that. That was stupid by me.
Yeah, honestly, if I was Ukraine, I wouldn't be comfortable with Chinese, Indian, or any of those countries' peacekeepers being in my country. I wouldn't be comfortable with that whatsoever. I would only want a European army to send somebody, or maybe the U.S. to send someone over. Those are the most trustworthy when it comes to, like, the whole Western situation. Even though India is like somewhat neutral, I still wouldn't even trust them at that.
Why not send in Swiss peacekeepers? We can assure that they're neutral. Like, they're militantly neutral. I'm just kidding, by the way. They would never even agree to that. But anyways, moving on from that and on down into the Middle East really quickly. I can't even cover the Syrian civil war today. It's day 2 of the civil war, and there have been more atrocities than Lively could collect over its entire history that happened today in Syria. There were massacres. There were people being dragged behind trucks. I mean, you name it, it was going on. It was incredibly horrendous. Those were literally the only clips that were coming out today, so we couldn't show any of it. But it is an unmitigated hellhole right now in Syria. It appears that atrocities are just being committed literally across the entire country at this point, and it looks like Jelani's guys are as brutal, maybe even more brutal, crazily enough, than Bashar al-Assad's Syrian Arab army. So a little bit shocking.
Man, they've been doing some horrible things. Like I've been seeing the videos coming out. Like, I'm sure y'all saw if y'all follow our Twitter page. I made a comment about it. I'm not even reposting these videos. They're that bad. And I don't even know like what's suddenly brought this on. Like, they've decided to go completely rogue all of a sudden and start acting like complete barbarians. They're going around to civilians' houses and shooting civilians and like in the leg. They're doing that. That's one thing. And they'll sit there and laugh at them after they do it, which is really sick. And they're also dragging people around behind cars as well that they capture. So that's just a surface level right there. There's much worse than that happening.
Yeah, it's incredibly bad. That's what all I can say about it. And at this point, I would have to be honest with y'all. I think Jelani actually is worse, or he's certainly as bad, maybe even worse than Assad, which is shocking because Assad was pretty bad in his own way, practically the Hitler of Syria, and now we have Hitler new and improved arriving and running Syria for the large part, which is insane to see. So he went from being some guy who was largely presented and largely tried to present himself as this kind of like mastermind guy who would be able to actually stabilize Syria and bring forward a fair government to immediately being draconian after just a couple of months in office, pretty much having most of the country turn against him that isn't a part of his religious sect and cultural group, and now he's conducting atrocities against anyone who's risen up against him. So at this point, I'd have to say that the Israeli operation into Syria with the given circumstances actually seems to be an incredibly good idea at this point. And if the Israelis did that, they'd probably be saving a lot of Druze people from horrific atrocities that would be conducted by Jelani's forces. But moving on from that, we were able to hear that the Israelis are back to bombing Hezbollah again today. According to Lebanese reports, over 25 targets were attacked in the last half hour. Very sad to hear. I'm incredibly saddened by the news that Hezbollah is once again getting curb stomped. I'm just kidding, by the way. I like to hear it. But moving on from that now, the Middle East, it is now time for us to move on back into the Ukraine war. And we were able to see that a Russian factory today in Starodub in the Bryansk region was hit, and it appears to be charring up.
Oh, it looks like Chernobyl. Everything that happens here looks like Chernobyl when it goes down.
You do not see the graphite. It is in fact lead. Because pencils are made out of graphite, reactors are made out of lead. It's a fact. I'm just kidding, by the way. But anyways, check this out.
Что-то упало сверху. Не плачь, не плачь.
I don't know if that's a dog or a person.
Все хорошо, не надо.
Все живы, ничего никому.
Мышки все оттуда, что ли?
We see them showing the damage. And that's the end of the clip, but still showing the damage that was conducted inside of Starbud. or started up by the Ukrainian drone attacks, and it appears to have hit some form of a military factory from what we were being told. Moving on from that and into the Kursk Oblast, we were also able to see that the Ukrainians were continuing to hit Russian forces in Kursk today and their solidified defensive positions, while, of course, the southern front of the offensive was not doing that well. And we were able to see here the Russian APCs coming on in, and we can now see this Tiger down here hitting them. Oh, and they got him dead on the nail.
Honestly, that tiger looks like it's like coughing up a loogie or something like that in that like picture over there on the left.
Something like that. Man, that thing needs a lozenge.
A lozenger.
That's actually how you say it, folks. I got it wrong. Like I got it really wrong.
No, it's actually a lozenge. I was just being facetious.
And churlish, indeed, for sure. But moving on from that and into our next clip within the Kursk Oblast, we were able to see some Ukrainians in the area near to where the offensive happened.
Короче, Курская область. Краще Шумахер року, Вадим.
So we're going to have to mute this because there is copyrighted music playing in the background. But we can see them evacuating some wounded from the area. We see one guy's wearing a winter's smock back there, and this guy's continuing to monologue as the music starts to play louder and louder over his voice, which we cannot hear because it's all muted.
That man is wearing an American patch.
He seems to be a fan of the United States of America. Yeah, how cool!
That's always a good thing.
We now see them getting out of the truck and walking around a little bit.
Oh, they're on the rim. Look at that.
Man, I guess you could say that it was on a rim and a prayer.
Man, the rim is the real MVP.
Man, that looks like my car when I brought it in for servicing.
I guess you could say those are not run flats, but it did run flat, but not the tire, just the rim.
Dude, that rim has been shaved down to a nub. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see that the Russians did raise a flag over one of the buildings that they did take today in the offensive that saw them split the Kursk front pretty much into two. We see them putting the flag up right there, clearly showing that they were making a significant advance in the area today. Now you just see him waving off the building. He wasn't really able to plan it. But now he's trying once more. But that's the end of the clip, and we're now moving on from that and on into our next one, where we're also able to see them clearing out some more Russian forces near to the area where the offensive happened. And while they were able to inflict some losses on the Russian forces, I can't really deny today, because the battlefield analysis is neutral, that the Russians did have a major offensive success in the Kursk Oblast today. And we can see here that they're about to start hitting those Russians. Hitting them with that gritty.
The Russians were on their tiny post, and they were getting pounded.
Ivan and his men were up on their tiny post, and they were getting pounded.
Honestly, when anybody ever says that now, I can't help but think that, like, honestly, if a soldier was thinking that in his head and he had to lock in when it was said like that, I heard today the statement made by the U.S. that Ukraine's been getting pounded real hard by Russia. I was like, the wordage.
Russia, I heard, was really hard, and they were pounding Ukraine. That's just like, honestly, man, that's how it comes out now because of that meme. Like, that's just how it sounds. It's like, that doesn't sound good anymore.
It just comes across so, like Andy said, suggestive, honestly.
Andy Kaufman, he knows what's up. And that's the end of that clip, but slow, baby! Slow, coleslaw, as a matter of fact. But moving on from that, now the Kursk Oblast and into our location unknowns. All we had in the location unknowns was the Russian casualty report. And sadly, no Bobcat was lost.
Damn, no Bobcats again. Somebody faked me out in the chat, said there's 2 Bobcats in here. Now, that person needs to come forward right hither.
That person needs to come forward We are going to hunt you down. We will find you. Like, I'm just kidding, by the way. But anyways, moving on from that, we were able to see that Miss Decent, Keeper of the Records, gave us a decent summary of today's losses, as armored personnel carriers are 3 times higher than 3 days, and only category above the 7-day average, showing a downward trend. And we were able to see the reports as a whole on the chart. 1,150 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 23 APCs, 72 supply trucks, 3 main battle tanks, 16 artillery pieces, 95 drones, and nothing else. But still, the losses were not that bad. Moving on from that and on into the rest of the news that we have for tonight on the Ukrainian front lines, we were able to see that the Ukrainians were hitting the Russians and driving them back a little bit up in the area of Kupiansk. We were able to see that right up here, right near to the Oskol River. The Russians were suffering. Moving on from that and down to the area of Kremenna, we were able to see that the Ukrainian soldiers found him. Apparently that video was a little spicy. I actually did not think it was spicy when I watched it, but nevertheless, apparently it had a little bit of extra spice and everything nice inside of it. Nevertheless, the Ukrainians were still pushing the Russians back near Terney as well, and were inflicting losses on them. And we can see them coming in and hitting this Russian tank that appears to have already been on fire, and the hit was a dead-on success, making impact harder than the impact that those certain kinds of substances had on the inner cities in the 80s. We can now see them also hitting the rear of this engine bay here.
Look at that. Crashing and burning.
The only time the rear of anything has been hit that hard was at P. Diddy's house. Meanwhile, we can see right here that an FPV drone is also going to be slamming into the front of this main battle tank. And
did you see that video of that guy who's in prison? I think his name is Sam Bankman-Fried, is the guy who's in charge of FTX. They did an interview with him. I think it was Tucker Carlson that did an interview. And he said, "Yeah, I'm in here with Diddy. I've only seen one piece of him." Pause, yo, pause. What the hell does that mean?
What?
Yeah, he said that. He said, "Are you in there with Diddy in the prison?" And he was like, "Yeah, he's real nice, and he's in here, and I've only really seen one piece of Diddy." It's like, whoa! It's like, whoa! It's like, what the hell?
Can you describe this piece? Where did this piece touch you?
I think the guy was trying to say that he's only seen like one side of his personality or something like that, but he said it like really, really sus. I'm not gonna lie.
Man, he really meant that as one piece, and oddly enough, he only sees it in the shower. But moving on from that and into the remainder of the news that we have in the Kremenna Forest, the 3rd Brigade was also landing some successful hits on the Russians. When you see them flying the drone on in, oh, there's the Russian. And there he goes. Oh, well, I'm sure he got some flight miles there. And we see them continuing to hit those forces down there. Take a look at that. And that's the end of the clip.
They love to rep the social medias right at the end of every video, I'm telling you.
They love to. They have to. But moving on from that and down into the major news that we were able to hear on the Ukrainian front lines today, the Ukrainians were able to liberate practically the majority of Toretsk. We were able to see today that most of the city, except for the western suburbs, have been taken under control by the Ukrainian armed forces. This is once again to remind all of y'all that just yesterday, the Ukrainians only controlled about a quarter of the city. As of today, they control about 2/3 to 3/4 of the city as of this point. It appears that the Russian Federation has conducted a massive withdrawal from most areas of the central and western area of the city, and it now appears that the Ukrainian armed forces have the upper hand advantage in Toretsk without a shadow of a doubt. We were also able to see the 42nd Mechanized Brigade doing its part today, targeting and knocking out Russian forces that remained within the central and eastern areas of Toretsk, which we can see in this video right here. And we can see here that they're continuing to slam the Russian forces right there. Slamming them harder than those cops slammed those people up there in Coleman here in Alabama. I mean, I'm sorry, those were actually sheriffs and deputies. But that was an interesting story. I don't know if y'all have heard about that recently, but apparently we had some Wild West stuff going on up in a town just north from here called Coleman.
Yeah, there was literally a guy that looked like Fred Flintstone who's apparently in the sheriff's department.
Man, I wonder if we can find their mugshots real quick. Coleman Sheriff Department. I don't want their phone number. They might like it said phone number. It's like I think
Also remember people, These people are innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. This is cops. Roll the tape.
Man, I'm telling you, man. But the testimonials that have been coming out, folks, they're not sounding good. I think these people are going away for a minute. But I always like the Shrek mock-up that was on the far right. Really something.
Oh my God. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. Alabama Police Department. Goodness gracious. This is Alabama Police.
Well, actually, sheriffs. We have to make that clear.
Sheriffs,
This isn't
yeah,
the police. This is the sheriffs. But I like this guy over here on the right a good deal. I'll explain why. Not because he's a nice person, according to what they're saying. He's not that great of a person. But one thing that I do have to say though is that I really like the look of this fella because he has the look, the stereotypical look of any idiot villain and the group that's like dejected and treated like shit by everyone else, and he's like the one who does the menial work. And he's like, man, one day I'm gonna become the boss of this thing, or something like that. He looks just like that. I've never been up towards Coleman, but now I'm scared to go to Coleman. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like honestly, that's a little bit scary because just to show y'all, to show y'all where this is in Alabama. So we are here in Birmingham. So we are within the city, and as you all know, according to the medieval proverb, city air sets you free. But once you go out into the feudal countrysides of Alabama, there's this town here called Coleman, and it's pretty much right along Interstate 65 that goes from Birmingham up really past Huntsville, but kind of technically to Huntsville. But that's where Coleman is situated, literally in the dead center of the interstate, heading through the northern area of the state. So it is a little bit concerning. I'm not going to lie, because to get to North Alabama, you have to pass through there, and that's the sheriff's department, and there are not good things being said about what that sheriff's department has done to folks in that area. So a little bit interesting there, but anyways, with that, we are going to be moving on from that little side note there and on into our next little bit of news, where we got to see a Ukrainian soldier having a happy birthday in Toretsk. Sadly, I really cannot play the audio of the video, but we can see the Ukrainians giving him a little gift. It looks like some kind of a sandwich of a sort, and it looks like they got a little bit of burning petroleum jelly as a form of a candle. It doesn't really blow out easily, but he did blow it out. And we now see him getting the little sandwich. And it looks like they're having a fun time with it. They're making the best of the moment.
That guy is so joyful for that piece of butter sandwich.
Man, he's like, hell yeah! It's like, yeah! Now, I bet you that thing actually does taste pretty decent.
It looked pretty good.
It doesn't look that bad. It's not probably the best thing that's ever been eaten, but not bad at all. But moving on from that now to Toretsk and down towards Seladove, we did get to hear the Russians are panicking in this direction as well. And we were able to hear that reporter Filatov said, all work must be paid, or not everyone, I personally, and then he was shot at the end of that message because he asked for more pay. But nevertheless, we were able to hear that there was a Pokrovsky protrusion. Now, they're not getting away from the allegations on this one, but there is a threat of cutting off of the protrusion. But beyond that, in small groups, seeps through the poorly coordinated mass. I'm not going to lie, there's many jokes that could be made on that first sentence right there. But anyways, moving on from that, we were able to hear that Dill attacks with forces of 425. So apparently we have the Dill Pickle Bird from Vlasic out there, greasing Russians. And they fight.
Why do they keep saying rock? Like, they keep saying rock in parentheses over and over and over.
Well, Matthew, that's because I don't know if you know, but their favorite kind of music is rock, and you should know that as an upstanding reporter. I'm just kidding, by the way. But moving on from that, covert and fast engineering reconnaissance, and then a small column of 2 to 3 armored units fly into the ranks of our troops and begin in close combat with our fighters. Start a battle. Our artillery can't fight because their own can also work, and our infantry does not have a battle management system developed by White. I don't know what that means. As a result, their stormtroopers, Square, prisoner of the rocks, are coordinated under the birds and split our infantry into centers. And they rotate their stormtroopers after the assault, bringing in fresh ones. That is, there is no battlefield isolation. About the problems, all logistics from Donetsk to Seladovo and beyond, the enemy is being actively bombarded with artillery and FPV kamikaze, sky not closed at all. From Seladovo to Novopustnaya, Pustanika, I believe is how that's pronounced, they could burn up to 120 units per day. Our equipment, we cannot burn it, the military say so, not me. And the same MP Shevchenko has 2 main roads that are under fire, control of the Ukrov. As a result of broken logistics, the infantry did not have enough BC, BC Skymen, to hold points. Engineers who had to close the entrance did not have the necessary number of mines and personnel. See problems with logistics. Page 64, figure 3. There were various units on Shevchenko, but there was no specific battalion or regiment, and no one really knew the real situation because the western part was held by the regiment. The eastern regiment and the people were again mobilized, not properly trained. No one closed the sky in terms of logistics, even in Shevchenko itself. There is complete superiority of the enemy. Simply put, people are just being pushed. Harbingers of the attack, the teeth of the dragon are spread. Everything was simply ignored, including our command. People are simply pushed forward. Losses have not yet reached lettuce to bacon shit. As a result, the staff does not trust the command, and not without reason. Flank guards also take lives. There is no countermeasures to Yukov drones. We fight with people, and Yukov with drones. And then this is the original Russian version. But beyond that, it doesn't sound like they're doing all too well in that cryptic telegram that was put out. Nevertheless, we were able to
Also, by the way, just as a correction real quick, just to make sure we got this right, apparently it's not the sheriff department inside of Coleman. Apparently it was the police department there, according to what people were saying in the chat. Just to clear that up, just to make sure, anybody listening to Alabama knows who we're actually talking about here.
The whole time, I actually thought it was the sheriffs. I had heard it initially. By the way, y'all, I don't look into that too much, like that whole side of things. I haven't been researching it. I was initially told it was the sheriffs, so I've just been running with that. But apparently it was the police. But moving on from that and into our next clip, and that's the police of the city of Coleman, apparently. We did have this United 24 clip lined up, but considering how late the news is running, we'll sadly have to forgo it because it's 7 minutes long. And we were also able to see that Russian bases were getting hit within the area by the 59th Assault Brigade, which we can see right here. Oh! And that's
also, to be precise, apparently it was the Hansville Police Department, actually, just to be even more precise.
So it wasn't even in Coleman at all. Like,
so where's Hansville at, by the way?
How do you spell that? I don't think I've actually heard of that.
It's right down there below Coleman. It looks like Hansville.
Oh, okay. I get what's going
so
on.
I think at this point, it's just safe to say some Alabama Police Department had people arrested. Because at this point, we've guessed everywhere, I think, but the right place at this point.
Somewhere, somehow, something's happening. That's the best way I can put it. But man, they have a railroad that runs through the middle of town. Who runs this railroad? CSX? Is it Southern Railway? Norfolk Southern Army? Who is it? Who do you call if this thing malfunctions? Cannot tell. Oh well. Anyways, moving on from that, it's time for us to get right back to the news. So, getting on back into that, we're going to be moving on down into the area of Zaporizhia, where we got to see some driving skills being displayed by the 33rd Assault Regiment. Take a look at it. They got a fidget spinner as their emblem for their unit. And here they go. They're taking that corner. And they drift in that thing. They drift in. We sliding. Oh, and they recovered. Legendary. And here they go again. Drifting around that corner.
Look at them go. Hit one pothole and it's over. That wheel's coming off.
Man, I'm telling you, man, that's going to be scurry. But moving on from that now into the open sea, we were able to see a Ukrainian drone launching a drone in the sea today. Here's the Ukrainian drone. Soon it shall launch a drone. And there it goes.
Oh, look at that.
The drone was launched.
Very nice.
Very nice. And there it goes, targeting Russians out there in Crimea. Go get him, Tiger. We see them just lining up. It looks like they're targeting in Osa. And I can't tell if they got it right there. Oh, wait, no, they're going for it right now. And boom. And they got it. Dead on impact. And that's the end of that clip, but very nice to see. Good to know. Moving on from that and out of that area, it's now time for us to move on up into the heart of Ukraine itself. We still have more news to cover. I got to tell you all, these news segments are getting insanely long these days, and I'm trying to shorten them down as much as we can. But we were able to see another Ukrainian air defense unit giving a big thank you to the US of A.
Every time on air raid warning sounds, I go to my workspace and successfully shoot down enemy Russian ballistic missiles, so that our people don't die. And every time I mentally thank the American peoples for providing us with powerful systems. We need to fight back in the sky. We need to shoot down Russian missiles. Be with us until the end. Let's stop Russia. Let's stop the war.
Very nice. And we agree with that, fella. He's got a good way of putting it. Moving on from that, we also got to see the slideshow here of a Mirage 2000 in the Ukrainian Air Force shooting down a Russian drone. And we can actually see it fire the Magic 2. Look at the turn on that Magic 2. That thing's got some pull right there. And the impact, literally right off the wing of the aircraft. Really cool stuff right there. Really impressive. I'd love to see it. But moving on from that now to that little clip, we also got to hear the air defense report overnight. And it was impressive. From what we were able to hear, there was around 100 drones directly shot down by air defense. There was also a larger number also taken down by electronic warfare measures. There were 25 X-101s and X-55s that were shot down last night, along with 8 caliber missiles and 1 X-59. So it appears that it was an incredibly good night for the Ukrainian air defense, and it looks like they were able to take down most incoming air targets. We were also able to hear that Zelensky's popularity, according to national polls, appears to be rising, as it appears that Zelensky's approval rating is now above 66%, according to the latest poll inside of Ukraine. And finally, without further ado, here is the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky on this day of the war. And so, without further ado, here is the speech. Speech!
Здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Провів ставку, був детальний аналіз російського удару сьогоднішнього і застосування нашої ППО. Зазвичай після масованих атак ми робимо такі розбори бойових операцій, ми виявляємо слабкі місця, а також досвід, який заслуговує на поширення. Сьогодні були всі необхідні доповіді щодо цього. Особлива увага ефективності застосування нашої протиповітряної оборони. Загалом росіяни використали більш ніж 260 засобів повітряного нападу у цьому ударі. Крилаті та балістичні ракети, ударні дрони. Нашим військовим вдалося відповісти на удар максимально професійно. Я хочу подякувати кожному підрозділу, всім задіяним службам, всім нашим воїнам. Як і завжди, удар відбивали комплексно. Зокрема, застосовували винищувальну авіацію F-16 та французькі «Міражі», які сьогодні проявили себе дуже добре. Еммануеле, дякую. Хочу відзначити всіх наших пілотів-винищувачів, наших вертольотників Сил оборони України, наші підрозділи РЕБ та мобільні вогневі групи нашої армії, окремо підрозділи 160-ї зенітної ракетної Одеської бригади, 208-ї зенітної ракетної Херсонської бригади і 540-ї зенітної ракетної Львівської бригади. Молодці, воїни! Дуже активно працюємо і над тим, щоб не допустити жодних дефіцитів у постачанні і для захисту життя. Міністр оборони України Умєров зараз знаходиться фактично у безперервному відрядженні, постійно на зустрічах і в комунікації з партнерами заради нових пакетів підтримки. І протиповітряна оборона – це, звісно, перший пріоритет. Сьогодні цей удар Росії по нашій енергосистемі, по наших цивільних об'єктах відбувся так буденно для Росії, так підло і так цинічно, як і завжди. Наче взагалі немає жодних намагань України і світу закінчити цю війну. Україна готова до миру якнайшвидше. Ми запропонували конкретні кроки і кожен день нові російські удари. І сама реальність доводять, що саме Росію треба примушувати до миру, до зупинки війни, до реальної дипломатії, до гарантування безпеки і до надійного тривалого миру. Я дякую всім, хто допомагає Україні, усім, хто підтримує нашу державу, наших людей, нашу оборону і просто правду. І ще кілька речей. За цей тиждень ми значно збільшили підтримку в Європі. І по лінії ЄС, і від окремих країн. І є особливо сильне рішення від Норвегії по фінансуванню нашої стійкості. Рівень анонсованої допомоги в цьому році збільшено до 7,7 мільярдів доларів. І більша частина буде спрямована на виробництво зброї в Україні. І це дуже допоможе. Я дякую. Очікуємо також рішення інших країн Північної Європи. Франція прискорить свою безпекову допомогу. Нідерланди готові інвестувати 700 мільйонів євро у виробництво дронів. Є нові вже рішення балтійських друзів щодо підтримки. Є хороші безпекові домовленості з президентом ЄС Коштою і президенткою Єврокомісії фон дер Ляєн. Готуємось до зустрічі на рівні керівників генеральних штабів у Франції. Ми продовжуємо працювати з нашими партнерами, які хочуть миру, так само хочуть, як і ми, над відповідними кроками. І наступного тижня буде дуже багато роботи тут, в Європі, з Америкою, в Саудівській Аравії. Ми готуємо зустріч, щоб прискорити мир і зробити сильними основи безпеки. Сьогодні увесь день на різних рівнях триває найбільш інтенсивна робота з командою президента Трампа за весь час. Багато дзвінків, тематика зрозуміла, мир якнайшвидше, безпека якнадійніше. Україна налаштована максимально конструктивно. Дякуємо всім, хто нам допомагає. Слава Україні!
And Hiram Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on this very day of the war. And boy, howdy, folks. Once again, what a news segment it has been. I've got to tell you that I thank you all so much once again for having watched so far, all 52,000 of y'all who have been here so far tonight. And at the peak, shockingly enough, 9.5 thousand people were here. One
Wow.
hell of a thing. It truly is amazing to know how many people call the Lee Spring Army their home each and every single day here on this amazing channel and here on this amazing live stream. We thank you all once again for continuing to listen to this channel as your primary voice of news every single day. And of course, we will continue to keep on covering the news as all of you have been expecting us to for the last 1,108 days and well on into the future for the next 1,108 days if necessary. Of course, a huge thanks to all of y'all for watching so far, and there's much more to go tonight. So please make sure to stick around, because we'll be getting into addressing the juiciest and most succulent super chat and live chat meals, and then also possibly talking, we will definitely be talking about trains tonight. And I'm just kidding, by the way, that might or might not come up. But anyways, with that, Matthew, what do we got?
All right. So entering our last question segment here, we do have a poll to address. It says, U.S. officials say that something is going to happen to Iran soon, and should we expect a U.S.-led attack? And I guess you could say that the U.S. has basically gone along the lines of saying a statement like, we're going to do something to them. But it looks like 51% said yes, the U.S. will be involved in it and probably leading the attack, while 28% said no, it will just be Israel doing it, and 11% said the attack will never happen. And right now, it seems like the U.S. might be leading some sort of attack on Iran's nuclear sites. The statements by the U.S. president today were pretty straightforward, unlike statements we've been hearing about Ukraine. It sounds like the U.S. is hell-bent on taking out these nuclear sites because we're being told that they are very, very close and in the final days of Iran being basically becoming a nuclear power when it comes to having a nuclear weapon. So I would say I'm with the 51%. I think the U.S. is going to be involved in it, and they could be leading the charge. Once again, Israel will definitely be involved as well. Like, I don't see any circumstance where the U.S. goes in alone. They will be with Israel and maybe with someone else as well. There's no telling. But Enforcer, what say you?
We want people to stop dying, bomb Iran. I don't know how it's working. I don't know how it's working anymore at this point, folks. But I do think the United States will be involved. Now, I would say, with that being said, I actually support this kind of an action. I do believe that the United States should be spearheading the charge if that does happen. I think that it'd be a very prudent and wise measure by the President of the United States to deal with a country that's clearly been nuclearizing for the past year and a half. That would be really over the past 10 years, if we're being entirely honest, but I would say that that'd be quite a prudent move, that's for sure. And so I would say that hopefully the U.S. will be involved in the attack, and it sounds as though, based off the public statements, it seems that we will be. And I think that it is a good measure in action by the United States of America to ensure and protect our strategic and security interests around the globe. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion, because, of course, that's all we have around here these days are opinions. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And also, someone said, when the war ends, don't shut down. There will always be news. We will be here too. And I've got to say that we will always be here on this channel. Of course, there's a bit of a caveat to that. If we are not able, because just put this out there for all of you so that we all know, sadly, the channel doesn't run on thin air. So there is a bit of a limit to how long we can run. As long as people are financially supporting this channel, not to say it like it's a mandatory thing, but that's kind of just an actual fact of life. As long as people are actually financially supporting this channel, we can run, as long as we're able to pay our bills, indefinitely covering the news, no matter how much viewership we get or anything else in between. But if in the future the news is something that people don't really care about too much and people stop supporting the channel and we aren't able to pay our bills, because this is about a 40 to 60 hour a week job at this point, we've been able to cut down the hours a bit. It used to be like 60 to 80 hours a week for me practically all the time. Now it's about 40 to 60 hours. Even still, with all that amount of time being spent running this thing, if we're not able to pay our bills doing this, then that's really when the channel ends up dying. Not that, we're ever going to start making people feel like they have to support the channel. If people support the channel and they enjoy it enough, then the channel runs itself. If they don't, the channel dies, and that is what it is. But there is a bit of a finite limit to it, because I don't want people to feel like the channel will always go on, because there is a breaking point financially where we would not be able to actually survive doing this. If we cannot pay our bills and we're spending all day every day doing this, then we're probably going to have to quit to go actually find a job where we can pay our bills. But beyond that, we should be able to run this thing indefinitely, as long as things keep going the way they've been going for years at this point, while we've been covering the Ukraine war primarily, and then over the past year and a half or so, we've moved on into almost completely covering Ukraine and world news, really world news as a whole. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least in my opinion. Also, Wonton 8888 said, why not turn on memberships? That's something that I will die on a hill about, because I just find them to be so insanely annoying, when I'm a viewer on other people's channels, because I actually do watch YouTube. When I get off of my channel, I watch all kinds of stuff. Usually I just watch whatever I'm interested in. Recently I've actually started to get a little bit more interested in medieval history, so I've been watching this channel. I think it's called let's see, what's it called? Medieval History TV, I think it's what it's called. He's got 1 million subscribers or so. He runs a great channel. I think his videos are incredibly good and well made. And so I'll watch videos like that. He doesn't have memberships, and I respect that. But sometimes I'll go and watch channels that have memberships, and it's so annoying and invasive, because they won't even let you watch the stream before you answer a pop-up window. A pop-up window opens up on channels that have memberships, and it's will you give money to this poor, starving YouTuber, or will you be a bastard and let them die? And it's I don't really like putting viewers under that kind of pressure when they just watch a show. People enjoy it. I feel like people ought to enjoy it enough that they're going out of their way to support it. And if they're not enjoying it that much to where they aren't going out of their way to support the channel, I don't want to harass people to make them want to give money, because I think that that's something that people just ought to be wow, I love this channel so much, I want to find a way to help them to stay on air, instead of us really being hey, douche, why don't you give us $1? That feels really that just feels wrong to me how that works, because I don't know. It just seems bad. And I've seen it being done on other channels, and it just never comes off too well. So that's really why we'll probably never turn on memberships. Even if the channel is struggling, I don't think we would turn it on even then. Because
even if we were struggling,
Yeah, even if we were struggling, I don't really think we would turn it on because it just looks so tacky. And at that point, it's like we are in that much of a financial bind. Memberships is not going to be changing much, most likely, rather than just running off everyone who's left because now we're harassing them to give us like $5. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And also, Monster Live, I think you are correct. It's Modern History TV. That's the channel I'm talking about. Really, really cool channel, by the way. I like their content. Like, it's very, like, as far as, like, production value, it's very low in that. It's literally just a guy who dresses up in historically accurate attire and just, like, stands in a field or walks around in a field and talks about medieval history. So as far as, like, production value, it's nothing like Fern or any of those kinds of channels, but it's very well put together. Like, this guy is able to do a monologue insanely well and able to keep it on topic, and I really do appreciate that. It's a really an enjoyable kind of a thing to listen to, and it's also very informative. Like, I have to get that guy's channel like an A+. He does great at what he does. He doesn't need production quality to get his, like, historical education across. He's just able to just knock it out entirely on his own. He does great. Like, honestly, one of my favorite channels in that kind of like a subject matter at this point. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. I'm just saying, if something happens to YouTube, I'm going to go open a McDonald's. That's where I'll be at. So you're going to go find me there. I'll be managing the McDonald's. But anyways, I think it cost $1 million to open a McDonald's, so I probably won't be managing it. But I may be flipping the burgers. You don't even flip burgers at McDonald's, so you don't even do that anymore. And by that time, the AI will be doing it. So I'll be, oh dear. But anyways, I must say though, on a side note, these Buc-ee's praline pecans and nuts, these are pretty damn good. Like, I got those yesterday. We actually stopped by Buc-ee's yesterday. These things are tasty as hell. Like, I'm trying not to eat them because I don't want to get diabetes. But man, these things are good. I'll tell you what, these are lovely.
Here in the city of Birmingham, there is a cultural phenomenon that has hit like crack in the inner cities. I'm not even kidding. It is Buc-ee's. This is it. They actually.
Hey, it's a beaver on the roof.
What is going on outside, dude? Do you hear this? It's like the SWAT team showing up out here. Like, I don't know what's up with that. But
some car pulled up in front up here, and then a helicopter flew over, so I don't know what's going on.
Police, put your hands up. But anyways,
so we heard you've been saying things that are not that savory. Oh God!
I heard you've been talking shit. Like, we got Vishwami on it, or whatever his name is. I forgot what it. Wait, Cash. We got Cash on it, and it's not Johnny Cash. But anyways, moving on from that, they have the beaver on the roof. I'm not gonna lie, dude. Why? Like no one is going to see the roof rather than us on satellite view. They literally put that there just to let folks on satellite know that it's a Buc-ee's, and we already know it's a Buc-ee's. But anyways, it's time to show y'all a cultural phenomenon of the South, and it's spreading rapidly. Buc-ee's. This is actually, I would have to say, this is the Romana Forum of our society these days in America. This is where everyone's going at this point in the city. It's to Buc-ee's. It is a glorified, well, it's not a glorified gas station. It is a gas station Taj Mahal for the large part. It's insane. They actually have freshly made fudges in here. They have freshly cooked brisket, pulled pork sandwiches. They have anything and everything that you can imagine.
Wait a minute. Scroll back up for a second. Scroll back up. Go back to that picture you're just looking at.
This one?
No, back up one more. Another one. Scroll back up to the picture you're looking at, the first one. You show that one. They have a praline pecan thing. I didn't even see that in there last time. That thing over there on the left. I didn't even see it. If I saw that, I would have gotten it.
Yeah, you know, I didn't see that either. That actually does look pretty good, and the price isn't really that bad for that much. Like, you know what? We might have to make another trip there. But beyond that, it is a really cool place. I'm not going to lie. It actually is pretty neat. You can actually see everyone gathering around and looking at the food and admiring it. It is weird. Like, let me go show you. Oh, yeah, they have a mascot, by the way. They actually do have a beaver mascot. I've never seen it, but it does travel around the store from time to time. I'm trying to see, though. Man, I'm wondering where it is, because someone's got to take it. Someone has to have taken a picture of all the gas pumps outside, because they have like 90 of them. It's an insanely huge amount of them, absurdly large amount of them. But oh yeah, by the way, they have all of this fresh cooked. Everything in here is like fresh cooked or custom made by Buc-ee's for Buc-ee's stores. But this is one row of pumps. They have 3 or 4 of these around the place. Let me just go to Street View and show you all this, because it is like, it's actually a sight to behold. So This is what Bucky's looks like. And these giant covered pavilions out here, they are all just nothing but gas pumps. They have like 90 of them here. And then back there, behind that, the giant building that's back there, that is the actual Bucky's store. It's about the size of, I'd say, a neighborhood Walmart. So it's a fairly large size store. It actually is about as big as the Bass Pro Shop's floor area.
Yeah, it honestly is. And also, by the way, this thing is over in Leeds, by the way. A fun fact about Leeds, some of the people that broke into the Capitol were actually from Leeds, Alabama. Hey! Whoa, Jack, whoa. It's like, whoa. Honestly, though, they go in there, they want the fudge. Give me that damn fudge. They're angry. I tell you what.
Man, we're
very angry.
We're going to take back this fudge and the country. Like, it's like,
man, honestly, they got some angry folks over there in Leeds. I'm not gonna lie. Like, going over to Leeds is like going to a very angry place. They're very angry. I'm not sure why they're angry, but they're very angry. I don't know why.
Dude, like all the areas of Birmingham can be like, you could come up with like music for each one of them. Like this area is like, I'll beat your ass, ding down, ding down, ding, you know, something like that. And then out in Irondale, there's no music out there. They're just exhausted. Like I don't think anything happens in Irondale hardly. This area, really this whole area of Birmingham, like the Birmingham name, everything east and west of it, the song that would play when you go into that area is just the sound of gunfire. That's a song. And then Mountain Brook would be that dun 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 dun, you know, that like that violin music, you know what I mean, Matthew?
Yeah, real classical and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, man, it's just very interesting they chose to put a Bucky's over there in Leeds. And also, by the way, I was joking about the whole situation that there were actually some people from Leeds actually broke into the Capitol, but obviously that's not a good thing. Just want to clear that up in case anybody's going to soundbite it or something like that and clip it. Not good, obviously, but seriously speaking, though, I don't know why it is, but people actually are angrier than usual in Leeds. I'm not sure why that is. Like, honestly, like we were going around Bucky's and we are like, goodness, I'm not sure like what's gotten into these people over here, but they're just like, they're a little bit testy.
I think it's the seepage into their water supply from the cement plant that might be doing it.
Yeah, I guess you could say they're concrete.
Man, it's concrete. But beyond that, also their water reclamation facility looks to be lacking in the whole water reclamation side of things. There's no water in none of this.
We're reclaiming the water. Yuck, yuck.
Yuck, yuck. We're getting the water. Where are you getting it from? The marble pit. It's like, I don't think that's a good place to get it from. Also, someone said...
Also, by the way, I saw Alex Street say, OMG, I hated Bucky's, too many people. Honestly, the first time I went there, it was super crowded like you're talking about. And I don't like huge crowds of people, I'll be honest, because it's just like, it's just too much. Like, I don't like being around like humongous crowds of people. Because you really don't have any way to like leave the building if you need to quick. And once again, like, you know, I think it was the Whirlybird when the first time we went there, we didn't want to be around that many people. But honestly, Bucky stays crowded. This place stays packed. I think people coming from Atlanta through Birmingham, they make a point to stop here. And this place is always busy. Like, it's never quiet.
I wonder if there's anything interesting. Oh yeah, they have the truck full of Bucky beavers. That's the mascot sitting inside of it. But yeah, that whole pickup truck, it's literally just filled with mascots of the beaver. The beaver is a worshipped creature here in the store. There is a statue of it somewhere out here. Where is it? Should be. He's right behind that guy. Yeah, there it is. You can actually see the face of the beaver statue right behind this guy here with the suitcases. But yeah, the beaver is like the thing. Like, it's like their version of Mickey Mouse. It's like their rat. They have a beaver instead. It's a little wild, like, honestly. Like, just looking at this place, this must absolutely blow away Europeans that this exists. And honestly, it blows away Americans. Like, I can get it if it blows y'all away. It blew us away when we first saw it. We were like, what the hell? And then you go in and you're like, wow, this actually is pretty neat. Oh, yeah, there's the statue. There it is right there. That's the beaver. Like, that's the beaver statue. They have it in front of the main entrance.
I thought for a minute that was our senator for a second. I was about to say, is that Tommy right there? I'm like, what are the odds of that?
Man, he's going, you know what? I might want to trade on these stocks. It's like...
I got a word from that there beaver right there that the price on NVIDIA might be going up tomorrow.
Man. Oh, man, dude. You got this. It's really true, too. But anyways, Now, I'm not gonna lie, dude. Everyone takes like almost the same pictures in Buc-ee's. Like, I'm trying to find y'all better picture, well, different pictures, but they're all about the same. So I guess we'll just leave it at that. Oh, wait a minute, look at that. That actually looks like a pretty good sandwich right there. But anyways, we'll leave it at that. Buc-ee's is very interesting, and it's a pretty special thing here to the south. It was originally a Texas thing, but the company's been spreading out pretty significantly from Texas recently. So it's spreading out in all directions from Texas, but generally it's still a southern thing at this point, mostly. But anyways, I hope that does address that well, if any of y'all wanted to know anything about that for some reason. But anyways, we are on to the next one.
All right, so jumping into our first super chat, the last question segment. This one goes to guess who? It is Lord Cog yet again, who puts in a second $250 donation for a total of $500 in total. Thank you very much, Lord Cog, for literally contributing the limit of the stream. It won't allow you to put in any more than that for a single day. And thank you very much, Lord Cog, for the massive support, humongous support. Just get some snacks.
And I got to thank you massively for the support, Lord Cog. And I got to say thank you for the massive support tonight. That is absolutely huge. And we are massively appreciative and thankful for your support. But you are helping us to get some snacks. And with that kind of support, we could get ourselves a delicious snack, a Wagyu steak. I'm just kidding. I've never had a Wagyu steak. But I think what I would really have, what I'm dying for right now, is a McDonald's quarter pounder with cheese. I think that's a snack I could go for. And Matthew, are you ready? Oh shit, I don't even have a car. Like I just realized that. It's like, are you ready for a road trip?
What happened to it?
Well, it's in service.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot.
Yeah, I keep on forgetting about that until I'm about to like think of something that involves me driving somewhere, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have a car right now. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Lord Cog, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running and make this thing possible. And I believe tonight, Lord Cog, with the tides you have made to the Lee Spring Army and the Cult of Matt, I believe that you have truly attained the title of Lordship. So you are, therefore, the Lord Cog. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again, Lord Cog. Thank you once again. And also, I saw Jack Jelly say, looks like the Enforcers and Enforcer Matt just got their rent money for another month. LOL. And you know what? We didn't just get rent money. We are actually going to be able, finally, once and for all, to get a kidney. Not that I need one, I just want one. Like, I'm just kidding, by the way. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. But a huge thanks to you so much once again.
So let's see. How much does a kidney fetch?
I think they're like 20 grand a piece. Like, I think I've remembered the prices right. Not that I'm like trading in those at all, just to let y'all know. But I think the last time I heard they were like 20 grand a pop.
Well, someone said, what's the long-term plan for the channel? Well, the kidney might go. But no, not really. I'm keeping my kidney. I'm sorry. It's staying with me. Anyways,
I would give away
keep that part.
I would give away my kidney beans. I got him.
Oh man. You're like a prepper or something. He got kidney beans.
Man, I'm telling you what. And I see some people, some people are like, wow, he's just gonna get a kidney because he wants one. Yeah, I mean, isn't that like the mark of an ultra wealthy person, that they just have a kidney on ice in display in their house at all times? I feel like that is truly the mark of a wealthy person. I would bet you that Jeff Bezos has a personal, iced kidney himself just for display purposes. I think that would be fairly reasonable.
What is it, like Squid Game or something? What are you, the VIP?
No, they don't have kidneys sitting around in their houses, Matthew. They have other things, like other things. And we will not delve into that any deeper. But beyond that, I hope that kind of touches the bases there. Although some of those people are also touching bases of not good kinds. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next super chat here. This one is going to go to Red Bart, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Red Bart, for that massive support, by the way. We appreciate it. And of course, like we say, that helps to keep the channel running. And also, I was going back to take a peek here because I don't see a comment attached to it. I was going to go back and make sure I didn't miss the comment attached to it. So let's see here. YouTube, you're doing me dirty right now. I'm currently looking for it, and it's not popping up in the sheet. What do you know? It's not popping up in the sheet. Oh, wait, there it is. It is. Red Bart put in 50. He did not leave a comment, though, but thank you very much, Red Bart. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for the support, Red Bart, for helping this channel to keep on running. I'm supposing that's when Bart from The Simpsons becomes a commie. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. That support is massive. And while you didn't throw in a comment, it helps us to keep this channel running day in and day out, and helps to make this channel possible. And I gotta massively thank you for that so much once again. And I hope that everyone in the Lee Spring Army gives you a massive amount of appreciation and thanks, because you're one of the folks who helps us to keep this channel running tonight. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And also, I saw some people talking about all kinds of things, many different things. And I've seen something that I want to talk about really quickly, very quickly. It's something that is interesting to me. And I see someone saying that, what in the world would a billionaire buy? And I would have to say that from what I understand, I don't think billionaires buy luxury cars. And when I mean luxury cars, I mean like luxury sports cars, like Ferraris or Lamborghinis or Bugattis. I've never really heard of any of the billionaires actually having any of those. I always hear that they have generally like just really nice souped up sedans or SUVs or something like that. I don't know, Matty. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I don't think they buy those kinds of cars.
No, they do. They just keep them garaged all the time. They're more into collecting them, I think, than they are actually driving them. Because once again, if you're a billionaire, you don't usually just drive around. You usually have drivers or bodyguards or something like that. So they just garage them, and they might go to a track day with it, but they're not going to take it on the street most likely.
I'm going to give you all a hot take. Folks. I don't know if this is a hot take, but I feel like it will be. I don't really get the point of luxury sports cars like Bugattis, Lamborghinis, and Ferraris, because while it is fun to drive a car, if you have that much money to be able to buy one of those, you're not going to buy one, because like Matthew's saying, you're going to have a driver. Because driving at the end of the day is a task, and naturally people want to try and eliminate as many tasks as possible and make life as easy as possible. So some people might enjoy driving around, sure, but generally it would just be easier to have your driver drive you around. So then the only luxury cars I think that actually count would be things like Rolls Royces or Bentleys, because those really do fit the category of riding in the back and having a driver, or maybe a Maybach. And so I don't really get the point of having any of those luxury sports cars, because me personally, I know, like, I don't hate driving, but I don't really love driving either. Like, if I was a billionaire, I would just have a Rolls Royce and have a driver drive me around instead. That seems to make more sense to me. And on top of that, it's like, whenever in history, like, think about it, whenever in history did anyone go, oh yes, let me go get my finest, fastest steed and let me ride it everywhere? Like, I don't really think many people did. Like, sure, there was times that they would on hunts and things like that, if we're talking about, before the era of cars. But most of the time, wealthier people would either have a private train that would just take them wherever they were going, or they would have a coach that was hired, or their own personal coach, like the ones at the Royal Mews in London, that would take them around. Because really, no one wants to be involved in having to do all that effort in driving. People would rather just lay back and, have a leisurely kind of an experience getting around from place to place. And also, yes, I did say Rolls Royce. It's Rolls Royce. But let's see. Let's see. I see a lot of people talking about, how about a Duesenberg? Actually, what about a Duesenberg? You know what? Let me take a look at that Duesenberg.
Also, someone said, you busted my balls for having a Raptor. No, I didn't. I didn't really do that. Honestly, if I could pick any truck, it would be a Ford Raptor. Honestly, those are pretty cool. I like them. They're good off-roaders. But a Duesenberg.
Honestly, these things are pretty cool.
That'd call the Oppenheimer.
I'm the destroyer of worlds. Get that weak, get him out of my office, dude. I honestly find it funny, man, that like Oppenheimer, it gets recruited by the army. They're like, we want you to build a doomsday bomb. He's like, okay, cool, that's neat. Then he builds the doomsday bomb, and it goes off, and he's like, okay, that's neat. And then they drop it on Japan, which should have obviously, like, you should have been smart enough to see that one coming. And then he's like, oh my god, I'm the destroyer of worlds. And then he went into Truman's office and he did that. And then Truman was like, get that weak little shit out of here. And like, they kicked him out. It's like, honestly, at that point, I think I would have had to treat him the same way, because it's like, you're supposedly smart enough to create the atomic bomb, but you're too stupid to understand that it's a weapon and it's going to be used against someone. What are you, stupid? It's like, what, do you not get it? But anyways.
Oh, also, by the way, someone said, is that the Austrian painter's old car? No, that's not. The Austrian painter's old car is a Mercedes-Benz 770. If you want to pull that one up right there, honestly, the car looked pretty good. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, nice car.
Mercedes Benz 770.
There it is.
Is this one's the one?
That is the one. It's not the one with the cut-off top on it, obviously. There's a different one for that. That was like the parade mobile, but this is the high-ranking official's car here. There's the guy riding in it right there.
Oh,
in that
look, here it
picture
is.
there.
This is the one.
Yeah, this one right here was a 770, but it was stretched. I think they gave it a different designation, like the M or the K or something like that.
Yeah.
They stretched it. They put the rims in black, and they also obviously cut the top off, and they added another row further back. And did the windows a little further back too, so it turned into this.
I'm not gonna lie, this thing actually is pretty clean.
Yeah, the car looked good. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm not saying that the guy riding in it.
No,
Was
I'm
cool.
just saying.
Like,
no, I'm not saying you said that. I'm just making sure like people understand what I'm saying about it.
But I'm not gonna lie, man. Like, this actually is a pretty decent looking like vintage automobile. It actually does look pretty good. Let's see, what is something that could be comparable from the United States during that time? Let's go look at Cadillac, because they would have been the one. If anyone would have done it, it would have been them back then. So let's go look. All right. I'm not gonna lie, dude. I really like the old Cadillacs like these, like literally buckets with engines.
Bro, what the hell's up with these people driving it though?
Man, he looks scared, and this guy looks like he's like distancing himself from the moment. Like it's like I don't know what's going on here. Also, this one's pretty neat. Honestly, man, I like the old like little bucket seat kind of car things like this. Like they just look ridiculous, and they look cool for that. But let's see. Let me go get y'all to the actual. Oh wait a minute! Look at this. I'm not gonna lie, man. They're actually pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean it's cool as long as people wouldn't wear those like leather caps and that goggles with it. It would look better.
Well, I guess they
Just
don't want.
eat the fly, eat the bug if it hits you in the face. Like don't wear that cap.
I think they're not wanting to get the rocks in their eyes, so I get the goggles. But yeah, the little leather helmet, that's a little too much. It's like it's not really going to be stopping much anything, you know? Like
Listen, I've ridden motorcycles. I've gotten the rocks to the face. I've gotten it. I tell you what, I'd rather take the rock to the face and take that leather cap.
And look like a dweeb. Amen. But beyond that, here's a 1921 Cadillac Suburban.
Oh yeah, that's not too bad looking. That's definitely not the Suburban of modern, but it looks pretty good.
And here's a Cadillac Fleetwood.
Fleetwood. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that one.
Yeah, the name I'm not really a fan of either. The Cadillac Phaeton actually looks pretty cool.
Not too bad, not too bad.
Dude,
honestly, like all the cars generally had the same look these days. It was the grill that was a little bit different.
Honestly, man, it's kind of like modern cars, man, how they all have like that bulbous look. Like it's almost like that back then too. But let's take a gander at the ones from the 30s. So we have the 1936 Cadillac Series 70. Honestly, not it.
Yeah, that's not it. That's not it.
Let's see here. We have the 1939. Oh, actually, this one is it. I think I like this one. A 75 town car.
That's a town car. Yeah, that's a town car. I recognize that one.
Dude, actually, this one's pretty clean. Like beyond the grill, like I don't really like how they used to do the grills on these, but beyond that, the rest of the body actually is pretty good. And then finally, we have the 1940 Cadillac 90 town car.
Not bad. That is definitely a weird design with the roof, though.
That is weird. How does that work?
It must pop on and off with like a Jeep top or something. You have to put it back on.
No, I actually think I might know how this works. Notice there's a partition behind the driver and the rear cab. I think this was specifically for a limo driver, so you just get shit on if it rains, but you're fine in the backs. I think that's how that works.
Maybe. You want to know a nice-looking old car? I'll be honest with you. I'm not a huge fan of American old cars. Like there's been some good ones, but I'm not like the biggest fan of it. If you go look at the old school Mercedes, let me make sure I got the model name right. Let's see here. It's the SL 300, but it's the racing model. I'm forgetting the model name of it. Let's see, racing model. Which one is that? Just punch in, 300 SLR to punch in that.
Is it the Mercedes-Benz 300 SL?
300 SLR.
I can't find the SLR. I can only find the SL right here.
Yeah, that's the same general model. It's just not the racing version. But this right here was classy. Like, this was really classy. I like these a lot. They had the gull wing doors on them. It had like the plaid leather, or not the plaid leather, but plaid cloth seats in there. Looks real nice. I just like these a lot. Like, these are very cool looking. They're obscenely expensive these days. I think they were also obscenely expensive back in the day too. But these are classy, way ahead of their time.
You know, one car I liked was the Jaguar or the Jaguar for those European viewers, Mark II.
Yeah, those are pretty nice.
Not as cool looking as the Mercedes 300.
No,
This is a massive
no.
downgrade from that. But still not bad, especially in like the silvery color. It actually looks pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean they're cool for what they are.
Yeah, like you did that quick. Yeah, they're cool for what they are. I was like, okay, all right, man. Let's see. One car that is cool to me, that is from the United States, would be the original Mustangs. Let me see if I can find the Mustang car. The Ford Mustang. There we go. So hopefully I can find the older versions of it. Like these, the 1969 Ford Mustangs, they were pretty neat. Also, I like that they posted with the P-51, really trying to sell these things.
Now, if we're talking about like old school American sports cars, like the best one ever made, the classiest one that could probably compete with that Mercedes 300 SL I just showed would be the Corvette. It would be the Corvette with the split rear window. That would be what it is.
We do not want the Corvette warship. We want the Corvette car.
It's all specifically the 1 year or the one model that had the split rear window. That was the iconic one the astronauts drove. It was a 1963 Corvette of that year.
A 1963 Corvette? Wait a minute. So you're not talking about like the really cool 1950s Corvettes?
No, man, not those. No.
What the hell?
No, I'm talking about one that would match like almost like the aesthetic of that Mercedes 300 SL. It would be the 1963 Stingray.
Man, dude, these are so cool though. Look at them. Like that's like, dude, that is like, in my opinion, like one of the coolest like Corvettes was this one. Like, well, not in this color, but let's see here. Oh, well, I can't find it. Anyways, which one was it again that you were looking for? This one?
Yeah, that's it right there. It's a 63 Stingray. That's the astronauts that drove these, by the way. They all had a 63 Stingray. All the astronauts did. That was like the car of the day. That was like the big one. And you can actually pull up a picture of the astronauts actually driving these on the launch pad. It's just so cool looking, like a different era of America when it comes to like things like this.
Let's see here. Let me go pull that up. Corvette on launch pad. Launch pad. It should find it pretty quick. Let me go get the Corvette Stingray instead. Okay, well, I guess I'm gonna have to put in 1960s Corvette Stingray.
1963, or it's not gonna be the right one.
1963 Corvette Stingray on the launch pad. I can't actually find a lot of pictures of these. The best one I can find is this one, and that's not good. Like, that's a rough one.
I see it right here. If you punch in 1963 Corvette astronauts, it shows it.
Let's see. Oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah, there they are right there. They got their own one. That's the different right there. That's a little bit different.
This one?
Yeah, that's it.
Man, those are pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie. Those are pretty freaking neat. Like I like those, but I still like these a little bit more.
Nah, I'm afraid not, man. There's no competition between those two. Man, honestly, like the 63 Corvette Stingray looks much better than that.
I don't know what you're talking about. I really don't. I don't know what you're talking about here. I don't know what the hell you're talking about around here. But I do like these things in like that like silvery aluminum looking color. They look great. Also, I like this advertisement thing that they had further on up here. Let's see, where is it? Here. That looked cool back there in the back. I was like, wow, that actually is a pretty cool one. Or right there. That's actually pretty cool looking too. Like very good lines.
Honestly, those do look cool. Now, you know, here's a guessing game for people. How much do you think a 1963 Stingray costs today? Like a nice mint condition one with a split rear window. How much do you think it costs?
Probably over $100,000 or more.
And give me an exact guess, and let me see what the chat's going to say too, and I'll give you the answer then.
$150,000.
Okay, your vote's for 150,000. So what does the chat think? What does a 1963 mint condition Stingray usually go for? And then I'll tell you all the answer here once it starts rolling into the chat. I'm sure it'll be rolling in any second. Someone said 250. Okay, there's a vote for 250. Someone said 100. Someone said 300. Someone said 350. Okay, I think they're getting a little bit warmer here. So here's the answer. So typically they go for about $200,000 to $300,000. Like
Oh
a
my
mint condition
God.
one. They're insanely expensive. Like they cost as much as a modern day, modern day used Rolls Royce. So yeah, they're like one of the most expensive collectible American cars you can buy as a '63.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't know that. But I would say that it's with a good purpose. These things look very good. They just look great. Like, look at that. It's wonderful looking.
It looks good. It's not 300,000 worthy, honestly, but it looks cool.
Yeah, how much did these things sell for back in the day, sticker price adjusted for inflation?
I wonder.
I wonder if we could find that on this page here. So these are about the wheels, so that isn't the actual cost. Do you know how much this costs? Like, no, I don't. Let's see. They keep on talking about the options. I don't see them talking about the actual cost of the car. Like, can we get the cost for the car, not the options? I'm wondering if we can, and I can't find anything about it. So, oh well, I guess we'll just have to leave that to the imagination. But anyways, I hope we were able to have a fun car talk there.
Oh dang, BC Skyman's got a '64 Corvette. It's the year right after the split window.
Really?
That's pretty sick. Honestly, he sent me the link to it right now. BC's got a nice one. It's in blue. That's honestly sick. Like, actually, that's actually sick right there. It's in really good condition too for a '64. That's nice. Like, I'll have to like show it to you after the stream. I don't know how to send it to you. I can take a screenshot and send it over. Let me do that real quick. I'll take a screenshot and send it over so that way everybody can see what it looks like. So let me do this. It's also on his YouTube channel, by the way, so there's no OPSEC issues with it. But let me get a screenshot here.
Also, by the way,
Discord.
just to skip forward ahead real quick, Ken Larson threw in a 20 and said 1967 Mustang Shelby GT500. So we'll type that one in and take a look. 1967 Mustang Shelby GT500. Looks like it's a popular one. Oh, yeah, these are pretty good looking. Yeah, these are pretty good. Let me go see if I can just get the pictures. Yeah, these are actually really good. Yeah, I like these. These are neat. I would say the Corvette is neater looking, in my opinion, than these. But these are actually on up there, in my opinion, too. Like, these are pretty nice as well. Honestly, American muscle cars, back in the day, I hated them. They've grown on me a lot over the years. And I actually appreciate them a good bit, especially the retro designs. And that's one thing that annoys me a lot. You know, like about modern cars. So hear me out on this. All right, so with Tesla, say, since they're the largest electrical car manufacturer in America, with Tesla, you can come up with all kinds of cool car designs, right? Because really, in the basic bare bones of these cars, pretty much everything is slung low on the actual chassis itself. So the power packs, the actual motors, all that is pretty much in the chassis. So the body can be whatever shape you really want it to be. And there are loads of cool car designs that you could pull from or make inspired derivatives from to make your car body designs out of for a modern day car, like this. And instead, we get this, which looks like a bubble. And I don't like that. Like, I really do not like modern car designs too much. And I think that there could be a lot more flair or style to them, because almost all of them look the same these days. They're this really bubbly looking, ugly kind of a thing like that. And I'm just like, it's just lame. It doesn't look good. And none of them really pop out anymore, where it's like, wow, that's cool. You know, look at that. Look at the shape of the design of it. No, none of that exists, especially with Cybertrucks. Those are just the worst.
Oh.
And also, I see Monster Lab say, body shape is to save fuel and electricity. Yeah, but still, the thing is, though, is that it's like, is it all about saving fuel and electricity and being as efficient as possible, or is it about looking cool? And I think there is a lot to say for looking cool, and that certainly would sell a lot of cars, rather than just being the most efficient as possible. But beyond that, though, we do have BC Skyman's Mustang in the Discord. So let's take a gander.
Corvette.
Corvette. Yeah, sorry. But look at that. That actually is clean.
That is clean right there. I like that blue. Like, I'm a big fan of blue cars, and that's a pretty cool looking one. Also, nice pipes on the side of it, too.
Yeah, that is actually really sick. I really like this one, BC Skyman. That you got taste. You got taste. I gotta say, really good one. And I'm really impressed by that actually. And also, once again, really jealous that you have a Moss 4956. But I can't find 7.5 French to save my life. So maybe I'm lucky. Like maybe I'm blessed. Maybe you know where to find 7.5 French, but I've never been able to find any. But beyond, well, that's cheap. But that is still an incredibly nice looking Corvette. So a huge shout out to you, BC Skyman, for an amazing looking Mustang right there. And with that, we are on to the next one.
I can only imagine with that Corvette, by the way, that BC's got. That pipe, the exhaust pipe, is going literally right by the door. And I see it's got a heat guard on it, but I can imagine if you touch your leg on that exhaust after you turn the car off, that's probably a burn in progress. I can tell you right there, it's probably going to scorch. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat here, this one goes to Danny B, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Danny, for the second support of the night. And we appreciate it very much. Very generous support. And thank you, Danny. He said, Chef Danny again, and I'm finally done with work, but sadly, I won't be able to finish the stream. I got talked into playing a late night pool tournament after I leave here, but I'll finish the stream tomorrow. Wish me luck and not to get wasted.
Hey, and best of luck to you, Danny B. And also, really cool to hear that you're going to play pool. I don't play pool a lot, but I have played it a little bit, and there is certainly a good bit of allure and fun to pool. I enjoy it when I play it, and I hope that you win the tournament. I hope that you're winning it right now while we're running the stream. But I do thank you so much for the support, and do not get wasted, Danny B. We are hardworking folks here in this country. We don't have time to get wasted. We've only got time to get on that grind and make that dough. And especially since you're a chef, you are making the dough, quite literally. So I wish you the best of luck. A massive shout out to you once again, Danny B, and a huge thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And also, you know, an interesting fact that I learned today, folks, this is something that I was really interested in, because I don't drink much, so the whole world of drinking and everything, it's very foreign to me. I don't really, and I'm fine with that. It's not really like I'm in a rush to learn anything about it. But one thing I learned today is that apparently in the medieval era, and I didn't know this at all, is that apparently the sweeter wine tasted, the better it was according to them. So there was none of that stuff that we have nowadays, Matthew, where it's like, oh yes, earthy notes, a tinge of sadness, you know, stuff like that. It was just, if it's sweeter, it's better. Like that was just the formula in medieval wine. So apparently wines, from what I was hearing, like in a video today, from northern Germany, I think were the sweetest. So those were the ones that were the most sought after and the most expensive.
I believe it too. I don't like all that fancy stuff, to be honest with you. Like, I don't drink, obviously, but if I wanted to drink, I just want the straight up, you know, just normal stuff.
Yeah, also like that stuff, like especially nowadays. Like I gotta be honest, like I'm totally fine with people having a drink, but the wine snob people, like they're like I'm not meaning anything. What, are you good?
Yeah, by the way, that was the Bucky's nuts about to go overboard.
Oh, okay. I didn't know what that was. I thought you were getting clapped literally out there by someone like with their hands. But beyond that, like the wine thing, like people do where they like talk about the notes and stuff, I don't really get it much because the few times I've ever had wine, it just kind of tasted like grape juice that had a bit of a sting or something to it, I guess is the best way to describe it. And so I was like, you know, it's like, it is what it is. I mean, it's not really like, you know, I'm going to go, oh, look at the different taste. Like, that's like, I don't know. Like, it's always a little bit weird to me with that. But beyond that, let's see.
Someone said news reporters have a very high alcoholism rates.
Really?
No, lawyers have the highest alcoholism rates, and they also have the highest drug use rates as well, because every single time we showed up at law school, there was somebody that was showing up to talk about why you shouldn't touch drugs, and if you need help with it, then come secretly talk to somebody about it, because everybody's so miserable in the legal profession. So I've never touched yeah, stress too. I've never touched alcohol like outside of just tasting it a couple of times. And to be honest, I'm going to leave it at that, because I'm always worried. Like I see people, I'm not necessarily saying this as a diss, but I see people like the hot dog man who basically ruined his life with substances. I'm like, you know, alcohol, drugs, kind of like the same vein a little bit. Some people can drink alcohol and not become an alcoholic, but you never really know. And I'm like, I'll just pass on it. Like I really don't need alcohol, so why take the risk? And just, you know, just pass on it.
Someone said, don't embarrass yourself. Go to France and learn about wine. Yeah, I got the time to go get a $2,000 ticket to go fly to France and then stay out there for months to become a sommelier. Come on. Like, be real. Like, I can't do that. That's crazy. But beyond that, though, one thing I'll say is, like, I'll just be honest with y'all. I don't like. I honestly kind of avoid alcohol for the same reasons as Matthew. I don't know if I'm one of the people who will become an alcoholic. So I generally just avoid it for that reason. Honestly, also we really don't have time. Because like, when do I drink? Like let me ask you about that. When would I really drink? Like, would I drink now? Like in the middle of the show? Absolutely not, because I don't want to get plastered in front of all of y'all. Another thing is like, do I drink after? So do I wake up tomorrow with a hangover and I still got to work all day anyways? Like, when would I be able to do that? And the answer is I really can't, because I'm too busy to do that. So,
Oh, wait, that's right. I forgot on the train. I almost forgot about this because the train was so, traumatic for me because I got sick on the train that I forgot all about it. That was the only time I've ever actually had just it was wine. I had that like actually to drink with the mule. And I remember by the time, because I never drank, by the time I was finished with it, I felt whacked out. I was like, oh man, like I think like even this little bit of wine here has like smacked me down actually. And I was like, yeah, honestly, I really don't like that feeling, to be straight up honest, because not only did I not like that because I felt buzzed off of it, no, but I also had the worst experience of my life on the train shortly after that. So I think I associate it with the alcohol, so I don't want to touch it.
I had a rum and coke, and I was totally fine. Like, I was just okay, and I went to sleep, and then I woke up the next morning. And so it wasn't much for me. Honestly, like I will say, rum and coke was actually pretty tasty. Like that was like one of the few times I've ever had hard liquor ever. And I was like, wow, that's actually not bad. But it's not anything that I'm going out of my way to go get. You know, like to be honest, like I just like having control of my faculties at all times as well, and never like being a little bit tipsy or not completely in control of my senses, because then you could do things that you might end up regretting possibly. So I generally try and stay clear of that whole deal. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. Miss Deesa said, I like rum and coke too. Hey, we got something in familiar there. And also, some people are like, wow, rum and coke is chill. Yeah, well, that I had heard about a rum and coke, and people were like, wow, it's great. And I was like, really? I was like, I guess when I get on the train, I'll give it a shot. And I gave it a shot, and it turned out to be pretty good. I was pretty happy with it. But once again, not really going to be chasing it.
You know a good one, not that I drink, but a good one is just like Everclear with a lime. That's good.
What the hell are you talking about? Like, it's like Everclear. Dude, that sounds like mouthwash.
It is. I've seen videos on YouTube because I don't drink, but I watch videos of other people doing it. And I saw this guy trying to drink Everclear apparently straight. And the guy nearly lost it because it's like literally like the guy described it as like drinking gasoline or something like that. So I was like, shoot, I was like, okay, that's tough. And apparently, if you set it on fire, it burns like firewater or something. So I'm like, I don't even know who would drink that. It seems like there's a doozy on your liver.
Dude, I was sitting there and I was thinking, man, I was like, I swear that Everclear is a mouthwash. I was like usually anyways, that's wild. Usually people don't do that, but that sounds like something an alcoholic would do, like, to be entirely honest. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And it's time for us to move on into the next one.
Yes, and someone says 90% alcohol, bro. No way. Yeah, no way. Like, don't drink that. That's not good. Someone said 120 proof. That sounds like rocket fuel. But anyways, jumping into our next one here. This one goes to Susan Janowski, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Susan, for that $20 support. And she said, keep up the good work.
And thank you so much for the support, Susan Janowski. And we will make sure to keep up that hard work, that good work that gets the news out to all of y'all every night. We are honored to do it, and we will continue to do it because we want to do it, and we like to do it. And so with that, thank you once again for support. Hope that does just that well. And with that, also, by the way, I will tell you one thing. I will go out of my way if I ever get the chance, because I've heard so much about it, and I know it tastes like crap, but I've heard a lot about it because of a video on YouTube, Multi. I will try it if it's around. I've never seen it, never heard of it. It sounds like it tastes like shit because in the Long March, they used it as like rubbing alcohol to clean their wounds on their feet. So I'm guessing that it probably tastes like straight gas, like literal gas. But
No.
if...
It doesn't. It tastes, from what I've heard, and also, by the way, we couldn't even really afford Mount Tide. It's like at least $1,000 a bottle, so it's insane. But it apparently tastes kind of like a little flowery. It's obviously got a real bite too because it's high proof, I think. But it's got like notes of like, like flowers or something like that. I don't know. Some person that's like an alcohol expert described it because I watched a documentary about it. But it comes in like a lighter fluid looking bottle.
Yeah, it looks stupid. Let me go get it for all of y'all because it's a very big thing in China. So let me go show this to y'all. So this is what it is. And there it is, straight butane lighter fluid for your outdoor grilling.
It looks sketchy. Like I don't even know who thought it was a good idea to like bottle it like that. It looks like something that you'd put in like your tool shed or something.
Yeah, it does. Like it's very suspect. But if this is ever around, I would give it a try just for the fact that this is apparently such a big thing in China. People treat it like futures, no joke. So I'm like, that's wild. So I would give that a shot, but only once, because there was this one time where there was this brandy that I think was like 40 years old that was around, and someone offered me a small taste, and I took like the tiniest sip of it, and I gagged because it was just too strong. And so I'm assuming this would be like the same thing. But this is apparently, I think, rice wine or rice liquor, I believe. Well, actually, apparently it's wheat based. Okay, well, it's not rice wine. I, for some reason, always thought it was. But beyond that, it's apparently grain-based. But I'd still give it a shot, although I know I'd hate it. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to none other than Wubba, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Wubba, for that $20 support. And this is tacos and coffee fun.
And thank you for the tacos and coffee fun. Matthew can actually cook up some very mean tacos, like incredibly good ones. And I got to thank you so much for the support because hopefully we will be able to get tacos that Matthew isn't cooking. Not that they're bad, it's just that Matthew probably doesn't want to cook them all the time. But beyond that, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and help us to keep it running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Philip Lamebull, who puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, Philip, for the support. He said soup and sandwich.
Soup and a sandwich? You're being too kind, sir. I thank you for the support. And if I had to have a soup, I would have a chicken and gnocchi. And if I was to have a sandwich, what kind of a sandwich would we have? You know what? I would have like a corned beef Reuben with sauerkraut on it. That sounds good to me right now. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because there's folks like you who help to make this thing possible and keep it rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Rick Gullinchin, who puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, Rick, as well, for that support. They said Russian state media hinted that if the USA can invade Panama, then Russia should take the Baltics.
Reread that one again?
They said Russian state media hinted that if the USA can invade Panama, then Russia should take the Baltics.
I didn't hear that one, but that's wild if they did. And I would have to say they should try that because that ain't going to work. But beyond that, I think it wants to give us support and help with this channel to keep it running because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. Keep it rolling. So a big thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Dustin Mayo, who puts in a 20. And thank you as well, Dustin, for that support. He said if the U.S. pulls out of Europe, what does happen to the caches that one Navy SEAL says exist? Will the U.S. clean those out, or will Europe clean those caches out?
I like how you said that, French. What will happen to the caches? Like it's the caches.
Caches.
With the load them with the charges and
it's terrible.
It's terrible. But beyond that, to answer your question. If the most financial sense would actually be to leave them over there because it would cost more to bring them back and store them here than it would be just to make new stuff. So we probably would end up just leaving a decent amount of it over there. Or, we might make the financially unwise decision of trying to bring it all back. But I don't know the actual cost in shipping on that. I just know that generally the rule of thumb is that if we ship equipment and supplies over somewhere, usually when the soldiers leave, that stays because it's pretty expensive to ship it back. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least in my opinion, or at least how I understand. But still, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. So our next one here is going to go to Just Chillin', who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Just Chillin', for that support. And we appreciate it. They said Poland is a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So what would they have to do legally to acquire nukes? Or is there technically no way to do it legally?
They would have to back out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and then start working on the path of nuclearization. That's the best way they could do it, but still, they're probably going to be met with severe condemnation by most, except for Europe. The United States, Russia, China would all probably condemn the Polish for working on that. The British and the French might look a blind eye or support them, actually, or they may also condemn them, and then Poland is never able to nuclearize. So that's probably how it would work, but technically there really isn't a legal way, quote-unquote, for them to do that. Although international law, there really is no higher power above other nations to really say if something's illegal or not, but the reaction of all the other countries around the world to that would probably make it quite clear that any way they would go about it, it would largely be perceived as an illegal attempt to nuclearize. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Kathy Gagliardi, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Kathy, as well for that support, and we appreciate that very much. And she said, I was unable to find news on the war. I Googled Ukraine news, and I found a kid playing a tank game and train. How was Enforcer news going anywhere? But I kept watching every day, and you guys have really come a long way, and thank you.
Hey, and thank you so much for the kind words. And I was driving train and tank. And that was a long time ago, 1,108 days ago as of today. Pretty crazy to think about that. But it's been a hot minute. And I got to thank you so much for being here for such a long time. And it really is crazy that it's been that long. It's even crazier to think that when I first started doing this, I had just turned 20. Like, I was literally 19 only a couple of days before the war started. Turned 20, started doing this, and now I'm 23, and I'm still doing this. Really kind of a little bit wild to think about that. Actually, years have passed since I started doing this. I have had a career that is 10% the length of Johnny Carson's on The Tonight Show. Kind of a little wild to think about it that way, because it doesn't really seem like a lot of time has actually passed. But beyond that, I do thank you for supporting the kind words, and the channel really has come a long way since then. Pretty impressive, actually, when you think about it. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and real quick, I'm running a poll real quick. I was just curious to see what the audience was going to say about this. So what do you consider yourself? 37% said a non-alcohol drinker, so a pretty good percentage, no drinking alcohol. 47% said an occasional alcohol drinker. 11% said a heavy drinker, meaning an alcoholic in denial. And 5% said a full-blown alcoholic anonymous. So only 5% in AA, apparently. So that's a good metric. But also, let's see, 48% said occasionally and 36% said no. So a lot of people have not really been drinking a ton of alcohol, which is honestly a good thing because alcohol typically leads to nothing good from my experience. But nothing wrong with an occasional drink as long as you can control yourself and have a little self-control. Things that are low in alcohol like wine and things like that, I really see nothing wrong with that, like a couple of times a week. I'm still not going to do it, but I mean, if you want to, it seems fine to me. But anything more than that, though, I think you're starting to kill brain cells. I think there's the science behind it. At least that's what I heard on TikTok. But Enforcer, what say you?
Oh, that's a bunch of bogus. It's perfectly healthy. I'm just kidding. It's not. Like, it's not. I generally would have to be within the 35%, because that's I don't drink, really. I have had a drink from time to time, but when I mean time to time, it's almost like a year apart from each other. So not often at all. But I do thank you all for answering that. I don't know why I was going down that path. I think I was just trying to find a way to exit out of this. But beyond that, I just don't drink that much. I really don't like things that change the natural state of a person. Like, that's going to be really weird to explain, but a person is a person in their natural state of being. One has to eat and one has to drink. So you have to eat food and you have to drink water, or milk or anything else. But anything else, like smoking cigarettes or drinking or doing drugs, it begins to affect, in my opinion, the way I put it or think of it, it begins to affect the natural state of your being. So your mind, or really your body, starts to get used to intaking something that makes time more joyous for you during those moments. So, of course, being inebriated, a lot of people find that pretty fun. I haven't been inebriated really ever that much to know. Of course, smoking tobacco is quite enjoyable because of the nicotine, so people like to do that. And then, of course, drugs, that speaks for itself. But your natural state of being is affected, because then if you do that enough, your natural state of being is having to have one of those things: a drink, a smoke, or some drugs. And then that's what you end up becoming. And you can't really live a normal life or enjoy things normally without having to have a drink or a smoke or drugs or something like that. And that's generally why I just avoid them, because I think that, as far as I can tell, life is fairly enjoyable to me without having to have a drink or a smoke or drugs or anything. So why would I ever have to have any of those to make life any more enjoyable than what it already is? At least in my opinion, that's how I look at it for the large part. So that's generally why I'd always probably be within the 35% that said that they don't really drink at all, because that's just how it is to me. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And man, someone in here is like the alcohol, like someone in here must be hired by like Jack Daniels or something, because they say, again, you're talking about something you know nothing about. You are uninformed. Like, I don't know why they're getting that offended about my opinion on alcohol. Like, look, if you're
I know several alcoholics. Like I've been around alcoholics my entire life, so I'm not unfamiliar with it. And also, how do you know what the hell my experience in life is? It's like, I've said I don't drink alcohol, but it's like at the same time, I've known people that are like full blown alcoholics. They don't go to Alcoholic Anonymous though. Someone said about why people drink. Well, I'm not saying why people drink. Obviously, some people drink because they're depressed and things like that. Like, obviously, I mean, you don't have to be a genius or an alcoholic to know why people are drinking. I mean, what makes you think that?
Dude, I sat there and said it affects your natural state of being. Like, and then he goes, "You don't know why people are drinking." I am an alky. What the hell is an alky? With 20 years of sobriety. Okay. All right. I don't really know.
Well, why were you drinking?
Yeah, why were you drinking, huh? Like,
I'm just curious. I sounded accusatory, but I'm just curious, like, why?
I'm waiting for an answer as well. And let's see. Let's see. Some people are saying, you're a dick. Let's see. I think we
say we had a
hit a
nerve.
nerve, boys.
Yeah, I think we did.
Let's see. There's a reason people drink and you haven't touched it. There's a million reasons that people drink. Like, there's not one reason. And instant.
They said instant gratification. Well, I mean, to my understanding, you don't get drunk immediately. Like, you have to sit there and
like
down a couple
minutes.
of them. Yeah, you have to down a few and then keep going at it and then feel sick and then get drunk. So, I mean, honestly, here's my catch, people. Like, everybody's had bouts of depression in their life. Like, it's just a human thing. Like, everybody has it. But you can't resort to things like alcohol and stuff like that for that. Like, honestly, I've never felt the need to resort to that at any point. So I just don't understand. Like, why do people just jump instantly to like alcohol or substances? It's like you're gonna have to like pull through it or something. Like, I get people like make mistakes and jump into it thinking it's a cure, but like you just gotta avoid it.
Yeah, but I see people who drink for all kinds of different reasons, not just instant gratification. Like, I know people who don't drink unless they're going to a social function, and then they get wasted because they think it's more fun at a social function to be wasted. Like, there's plenty of different reasons that people drink. It's not just for, instant gratification on that kind of a thing. But, and also they said because life is hard. Yeah, life is hard for everyone, though. It's like, that's like, I don't really get the whole thing with that. Like, life is hard, so let me go get, like, hooked to something. It's like, doesn't that make life even harder in the end? Like, that seems like the easy way to make life easier, but that honestly makes life harder, especially if you become an alcoholic. Because now you got this entire other problem to deal with, which was supposed to make your life easier, but now it's even harder because you're an alcoholic. So
man, if I didn't become an alcoholic in law school, and I was literally in the dumps in law school, and I didn't become an alcoholic, like most people should be able to have the self-control not to do it, because I was literally just like trudging along every single day, like, oh my God, like this is like misery on earth, like showing up to law school every day. And I can understand why people were wanting to maybe become alcoholics. But like, at the same time though, it's like, you got to have enough self-control not to do that, because, you'll just mess things up even worse. You'll be even more miserable after you become an alcoholic.
Yeah, it's like, and also her royal fluffiness said, gaming and watching the Enforcer is my alcohol. Yeah, that's really how I look at it. Like, I find, like, to me, like, just sitting around with some folks and chit-chatting and saying the dumbest stuff and then getting a laugh out of it, that's honestly, like, how I just get my kicks for the day. It's like, I don't really have to drink to get my kicks. It's like, that honestly is good enough for me. I get a laugh. I feel a little bit better about it, and then I move on and do something else or, something like that. I just don't really ever see where I could become a person who really drinks or smokes. Really, I just don't think I could. Not to say that the people who are drinking, are doing something wrong. I know a lot of people who drink in moderation sometimes get a little turnt, but beyond that, they're fine people. They get about their lives, they do things, and they make it work. So to each his own. But I just don't think I'd ever be able to be in that kind of a camp. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, Matthew, how many super chats do we have left?
So we currently have 30 left.
Dang. Okay. Well, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Andrew Barbaro, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Andrew, for that $20 support. And I do not see a comment attached to it. But thank you very much, Andrew, for supporting the channel and helping to keep it running. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you so much for the support, because while you didn't throw in a comment, the support means a lot. It helps us keep this thing running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Char G, who puts in a 20. And thank you, Char G, as well, for once again throwing in that support, and we appreciate it. And Char G says, I have no words for what is going on in the world right now, but thank you, boys, for what you're doing. And T1FTC.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Shargy. And of course, we are more than happy to keep on putting out the news. The news isn't always the best, it's kind of all right, kind of not all right. Tomorrow, you'll probably see, because we are literally teetering right on the edge of 338,000 subscribers. We're going to be at 337,000 tomorrow. Some people aren't happy, and it is what it is. But I do thank you so much, Shargy, for being one of those folks who really do enjoy this channel and support it to help it to keep on running, so that way we can keep on making sure that at least the news is presented somewhat well. Nothing else might be going well, but at least the news is good. And so a big thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we will make sure to take one from the chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
And this one goes to Joe Leslie, who says, has Russia passed the tipping point in heavy equipment and tech that they can't sufficiently mount attacks, and maybe the end is nigh?
The end is nigh? Can you reread that one again? That went by fast.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah.
Joe said, has Russia passed a tipping point in heavy equipment and tech that they can't sufficiently mount attacks?
Yes, for the large part they have. That's why we're seeing, unless if we're talking about Kursk, which seems to be an exception to the norm. Most of the time, that seems to be the case at this point. So I would have to say yes. So I hope that does answer that question well. Thank you once again, Shargy, for the support and sponsoring that live chat. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Jonathan H., who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Jonathan, also for the support. He said, LOL, if you look at the picture of the North Korean submarine again, they had to cut a hole in the wall of the shed to fit the thing into the building. I noticed that, by the way. They cut a hole at the top of the little, little tower part of it. And I was thinking, did they really, Sawzall that? I think they did.
Yeah, look, they did, man. Because it's not over here. It's just over there. And so they said, it can't get out. Saw it out. And, made an opening for it. That is so stupid.
That is stupid. This shed right here was probably not made to make submarines.
Probably not, dude. It was probably made to, maybe maintain a small little patrol boat or something, but not build an entire missile submarine inside. That is just goofy. Oh my lord, I didn't even notice that. Thank you for pointing that out, because yeah, they sawzalled that thing. And look, you can see it's not even symmetrical. This side over here is higher up than this side. You can clearly see that in the picture.
yeah. They don't even know how to use the ruler on it either, apparently.
Dude, they can't even look. You can even see it right there. It's an actual noticeable cant up there. They couldn't even saw it straight. That is a shame. The build quality on this thing was horrendous. If they can't even do that right. But anyways, I hope we addressed that well. Thank you once again for supporting helping this channel to keep it running. And I didn't even notice that. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to none other than Ari Sowini, Kiwi Wife and Finn, who put in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Ari, for that support and helping to keep us running as well. And Ari said, what's the idea of discussing Nord Stream 2 behind closed doors? Is it usable, and are all the parties involved in funding it in the present? And LSA. You know what's funny about that, Ari? What's funny about that is we really don't even know who attacked Nord Stream 2 the first time. There were rumors that America attacked it, and we don't know if that's true or not. But Enforcer, is that thing even like in functionable condition, like Ari was saying, or is it good to go?
It's not in functionable condition. From what we understand, it's still heavily damaged. And I don't really think any of the parties that were receiving the gas through Nord Stream 2 would want to receive it anymore. So I don't really know what the point would be of reopening that gas line, because it's not like Europe really wants to be connected to the Russians economically or supply-wise that way anymore, I don't think. So while that might be an idea, I don't really think that's a promising prospect, because if all the European countries just deny buying Russian gas, that kind of is an open and shut case for that attempt. It just will not work. But I hope that does address that well, and I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to all the French champagne. Who puts in a $20 donation? Oh, yeah. Oh,
Go ahead, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Paul Masson, for that support, and we appreciate it. But there's no comment attached, so Enforcer, go right ahead.
Oh, the French champagne. It has always been known for its excellence. There is a California champagne inspired by that same French excellence, and that is Paul Masson. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. So a huge thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Ken Larson, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Ken, as well, for supporting the channel. He said 1967 Mustang Shelby GT500.
And I thank you for the support, and we actually got that one a little bit earlier, and we did take a gander at it. And it is pretty good looking, but I still think I'd have to agree with Matty. I think the Corvette does look a little bit better than that one, but still on up there as one of the classics for sure. And so with that, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, and we are on to the next one.
Do you know a famous person who happens to be a comedian who has a very pristine condition 1963 Corvette?
Jerry Seinfeld.
You're right.
It's not even picking it up hardly.
Oh,
like it went.
damn.
I was like, okay. I was like, but yeah, I knew that because I think Jerry Seinfeld collects cars almost like Jay Leno, if I'm right.
Yeah, he's. I think he's bigger into older cars, not the modern stuff. Jay Leno has modern and old stuff, which is kind of unique. And also, Jay Leno has a obscenely large collection. Like, the guy's got a freaking warehouse full of cars out there in California, and he actually drives them all. And he also has motorcycles too, including the vintage ones. And he actually is brave enough to start them up and actually ride them around town, which is unusual for a collector.
Man, I'm not going to lie, man. Like, his collection is probably one of the most impressive in the world, at least as far as I've seen. Like having, well, I don't know if he has the Batmobile, but he did have it on for an episode. I remember that. But it's just wild, like, the collection of stuff that he has. And I got to say, it's really impressive. I got to respect the guy because, like, whether you liked him as a talk show host or not, he sure as hell has done a lot to preserve and collect cars of literally every single era, including the literal beginning of the automobile that's inside of his garage. Really impressive there as far as, like, a historian or a collector would be concerned. And also, he's got it really well set up, too. I mean, like, there's loads of memorabilia and collectibles on the wall and posters and paintings and things. Like, it's just such an impressive kind of a setup. He really has an affinity for cars, and it does show.
Yeah, he's got all kinds of stuff. Like, this place is so huge, like, it's insane. This thing could rival like some actual car museums. Like, we have a place in Birmingham called the Barber Motorsport Museum. Not so much into cars. They do have some cars there, but mainly motorcycles. I think Jay Leno has more motorcycles than the Barber Museum's got, and that's like world known. Like, here in Birmingham, like, everybody knows about that museum, and I think Jay's got more than that.
Let's see. Let me go. Oh, here we go. Here it is. This is the museum that Matthew's talking about. It's actually really impressive, and I do recommend that y'all come through and take a look at it whenever y'all are passing through Birmingham, if you are. But there's some really cool stuff in here. I mean, they have motorcycles of every single era, much like Jay Leno has cars of every single era. And they also have just some wonky ones, like, but also...
Oh, look at that Ninja H2. That's beautiful. That's a turbocharged bike, by the way, the H2R.
Dude, I'm not going to lie, man. I like their military motorcycles that they had in there from World War II, like the German ones, the American ones, all of the ones in between. They were really cool.
Yeah, those are pretty sick. I'm more into the modern bikes, but, these are pretty neat.
Man, it's an impressive place, though. But hell, Jay Leno will beat this place out every day. Like, no doubt. He's got more motorcycles than they do. It's just wild. But you got to give it to him. At least he didn't, just like squander his money on like a yacht or something like that. He actually did something incredibly cool, and I appreciate him for it. That's really neat. And I watch his videos from time to time on that sort of a thing, and they are very good. Like, he knows his stuff about each and every single one of them. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address it well. And someone said, we are really distracted tonight. It's the question segment, man. And I know you know that because you've been here for 3 years. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
Oh, we got a bot. Someone said the Ukrainian government's corrupt and Zelensky's a globalist. He's not a globalist because he's in charge of Ukraine. He's not in charge of the whole world or something, so that negates the argument.
He's running the world. He's running the world through his tiny little hands. Have you seen him? He's only like 5'4", really little guy. Doesn't get any women except for the one woman that he's got. They got that fake Bugatti receipt. Go pull it up.
That dang Zelensky and sinking our economy. I tell you what, those tariffs. I mean Zelensky. But anyways, moving on here to our next super chat. This one goes to Rick Galinchin once again, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Rick, for the support once more. He said, Matt, a 1967 Corvette L88 sold for $3.2 million at Barrett Jackson last year.
Dang.
That is insane, by the way. $3.2 million. That, I don't know if that's a record for those, but I wouldn't be shocked if it was. That's the highest one I've heard of personally. But yeah, collectors are willing to pay obscene amounts for like pristine condition, old style cars like that. I've seen the European ones go for a lot more. Like, obviously, I think the most expensive one ever sold at auction is a Mercedes 300 SLR. I think it was like 300 million or something like that, just insanely expensive. But wild costs. But Enforcer, what say you?
The collector world is insane, man. And sometimes the things you would think are the most mundane end up being the most expensive. Like in the coin collecting world, some pennies and specific like misprints of pennies can fetch hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's really a wild thing with that. But that's crazy to think that a collector would spend millions of dollars for a car like that. But you know what they say, if there's something out there, someone is willing to pay any price for it. But with that, thank you once again for support and helping this channel keep it running. I hope that does address that somewhat well. One thing that I have that I think is pretty neat, speaking of something collector's item, I think it's really the only collector's item thing I have. Let me go show it to y'all. I can't show y'all mine specifically, but I can show you what it is. And Matthew, you already know what it is because I keep it in that box. But it is the M1D. There weren't many of these made. There was about, I think, if I remember correctly, there was only a couple of tens of thousands of these things made. They saw service in the Korean War and in Vietnam. Problem is, I'm a left-handed shooter, and this thing only works for right-handed shooters, so I can never shoot it. And also, I wouldn't want to because mine's been unfired its entire service life. It was never used. So I have this. I have the scope and everything. It's the only Garand that actually could mount a scope. And these things actually are fairly rare. I believe there's only about 5,000 or less of them in private ownership across the United States. And I was just very lucky to be in the right place at the right time to get one of these for really the cost of a normal M1 Garand for the large part. But from what I understand, these things are actually fairly rare and fairly expensive for the large part. I just happen to be literally the luckiest person on earth when I got mine. And it's a legitimate one. It's not a counterfeit or a ripoff. There are a decent amount of counterfeits of these out there, but mine actually came with its original packaging that it came in from the CMP, which was the one who distributed all of the M1Ds. So I actually know that mine's an authentic, genuine original. And it also came with everything else packaged up, unopened. So I have the flash hider, like this one, like the Loudner is what some people call it because it looks like a bugle horn. But I've got that, the cheek pad, and the sling, and everything else, every other accessory that was issued with every M1D in its original packaging, unopened, a lot like this down here, with the box. All of it original, and the gun's never been fired. It still has the cellophane wrapping over the barrel, over the charging handle, and it's still got Cosmoline all over it. So, an incredibly rare find. So really, really cool. As a matter of fact, I don't even think it's ever been fired. Several times rather than probably testing when it was made at Springfield Armory. But anyways. With that, I hope that does address that well. Really the only collectible thing I've ever gotten in my entire life. But it's pretty neat, and every once in a while I pull it out and take a look at it and then put it back up and then don't touch it. Because I'm scared of touching it and putting finger oils on it and then getting the metal to rust. So I don't really fiddle with it much at all. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Michelle, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Michael, for that $10 support, and we appreciate it very much. But Enforcer, what say you?
Hey, and thank you so much for supporting, helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and also we got another bot in here. They had to go. There they went. They're gone in 2 seconds. But anyways, our next one here goes to Kathy Gagliardi, excuse me, once again, who puts in 2 more super chats. And thank you very much, Kathy, for that support. They said, I was upset that everybody that I talked to didn't know about the war and didn't understand why it's important and thought it had ended. And thanks to the mess of politics, now everybody's talking about it.
I thank you for the support, and that is kind of true, but really, the thing is like, it doesn't really matter if everyone's talking about it, if they really don't know what they're talking about, because if they thought the war ended, is it really good for people who were that ignorant on the situation to know about it, to have a take on it? Because if anything, it's not going to be a good take. I mean, they don't know anything about it. Like, it's a good thing in a way, but mostly a bad thing. Because I feel like, you know, having people talking about something, if they really know nothing about it, it might not even be that good of a thing, really. But still, I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Let's see. Also, 10K say, I'm sure you can 3D print something that will help in shooting that. Not really. I'll explain really quickly what the problem is with me trying to shoot an M1D. Because, like, even if I wanted to shoot it, I really can't. The scope, because of how the M1 Garand ejects the cartridges, and also how everything else works with the rifle, it's impossible to actually put the scope pretty much center beam, if you want to call it that, right over the top of the rifle. And also, you can't mount it, you can't make it ambidextrous where you can mount the scope on the left or the right side of the rifle, because the charging handle is on the right side of the rifle, you know, relative to the shooter. So with that in mind, you had to make, well, John Claudius Garin, who was the guy who actually made this modification to his own rifle, he had to put the scope onto the left side of the rifle, and I'm left-handed. So when I fire a rifle, that scope is way off. So I have to take my head, and I literally have to, like, bend it pretty much all the way over the stock and pretty much have my head at the 90 degree angle to actually look down the scope and fire it effectively left-handed. So there really is no way to do it, and that's why in Vietnam, because these things were still being used in Vietnam, they would issue M14s only to left-handed shooters, left-handed marksmen and snipers, and then they would issue these M1Ds to people who were not able to get an M1D, but only if they were right-handed, because that was the only group of folks that could shoot the rifle were right-handed people, not left-handed people. So that really is the big issue with it. Like, there's really no way to get around that rather than trying to learn how to fire right-handed. And on top of that, if I fired it, it loses a lot of its collector's value because it is an unfired M1D. So firing it at all, it just ruins the value entirely. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Kathy Gagliardi once again, who puts in the 10. And thank you much, Kathy, for the third support tonight. And she said, any media that I watch, I have mentioned you guys in the comments about the Enforcer and how they can trust the war news coverage. And thank you for that, by the way. I said, I hope the LSA will do the same and grow the channel.
And I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for going out and advertising. I wish a lot of people would do that, because I think a lot of people will really enjoy this channel if they could find it. And I gotta thank you for taking that on as an initiative of yourself. I thank you for that. Very kind of you, actually. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Vulture 1066, who puts in a 10. And thank you, Vulture, as well. They said, can we have a poll about mandatory military service for 18-year-olds for 1 year?
And I thank you for the support. I think that would largely be unlawful for the large part in the United States, unless if we were in a state of wartime. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, we weren't technically at war in Vietnam and they still had a draft. But there was, I believe there was some workaround on that one. But just having every citizen in the United States serve 1 year in the military, I feel like that's a little bit undemocratic, because largely throughout all of U.S. history, being a member of the military has been largely a volunteer force, unless if it was an emergency in wartime, and then that was the only time that there was a draft. But it was a national necessity. I largely actually would say I think it is fairly un-American to pretty much force every citizen into some mandatory minimum military service. And also, we already have a large enough military on a volunteer basis as it is. So I don't really know if making it mandatory for people to serve 1 year minimum would be that good. And also on top of that, we are a contract force that requires higher levels of training and experience. And if we only had a 1 year minimum service, really in the United States military, what that means is that someone goes to basic, then they go to job training, and then they get out, and they don't even serve at all. And the military just spend all of this time training and teaching this person how to do a job that they're never going to do. And then they just leave and never come back for the most part. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. But honestly, in terms of mobilization, that might actually be a good idea. But then again, I think that still would largely start to work around the idea of the United States being a free country and having a choice in things for the large part. And so with that, I thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Khan LSA, who puts in the 10. And thank you, Khan, as well. He said, now that our government has betrayed Ukraine by blinding Ukraine's army to incoming attacks, shutting down all the guidance systems to all the HIMARS, do you think Ukraine can still hold Kursk?
It doesn't really look like they are going to be able to hold Kursk, in my opinion. They might have to withdraw, even if they had those weapon systems, but who really knows? That would be a little bit hard to say. But I do thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Nightmare Before Christmas, who puts in the 10. And thank you as well. It said, LSA, and what do you think the price for a nuke is? It could be very valuable export from the UK and France in the next few years. The US and Russia pulling out of the non-proliferation treaty was a bad idea. And LSA.
And thank you so much for the support. I would actually have to say the cost of nuclear weapons probably isn't really that expensive. Like in terms of military figures, they're probably only tens of millions of dollars, about the cost of, say, a normal fighter aircraft. So I would say that it's probably not much, but also at the same time, I wouldn't say that exporting them is a good idea to just, really whoever wants to buy them in Europe, because we really don't want to see nuclear proliferation. It wouldn't be that good of a thing. But still, thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Just Chillin', who puts in a 10. And thank you as well, Just Chillin', for that support. They said, I can see the current administration threatening Poland with sanctions if they try to acquire nukes. And what say you?
I could certainly see that. I really could see a lot of countries threatening sanctions against Poland for that reason. Honestly, I don't even know if the European Union would really be behind that. But still, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to the B-Man, who puts in the 10. And B-Man says, Zelensky saved the donkeys, keep attacking.
And Zelensky, I hope he does save those donkeys, those poor things. They're just out there doing their thing, just kind of vibing and thriving, hopefully. But still, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and real quick, the poll, which is sponsored by Vulture 1066, it says, would you support mandatory military service for 18-year-olds for 1 year in the USA? 58% said yes, and 42% said no. Honestly, I would say this. Instead of mandatory military service, because once again, the enforcer is right, there would be issues with the legality of that without being in a wartime scenario. Maybe if they made it mandatory or at least more widely available for maybe JROTCs to be in high schools and pretty much every high school around the country, maybe that would work. Obviously, it's not military training, obviously, but it would at least show the young people that there is, once again, a military side of careers that they could take if they wanted to, and also give them a general education in marching and simple military things like that in a sort of a relaxed environment. But that's what I would say. But Enforcer, what say you?
I generally have to say still no. I don't really think that's a great idea. And also on top of that, who's to say? Yeah, like generally, I just don't really like the idea of that all too much. I think military service should be volunteer based. If that was the way it was supposed to be, we would have had that forever, and we did not. And also, I saw some people say that military service was mandatory at some time in history in America. Yeah, during the colonial era, when there were Native American tribes, or as I call them, Indian tribes, that would attack you out of the blue. Yeah, pretty much you were always in a state of emergency because, you could get scalped any minute, so you kind of had to be ready to go serve in the militia if need be, or to fight the French in other times in early colonial history. But beyond that, the U.S. Army has always been, even in a decent amount of conflicts, largely volunteer based. Like even in the Mexican-American War, they had to wage some of their campaigns around when most of their soldiers' contracts were going to end. So if their contracts were going to end, they just sit around and let their contract end and then send them home, and then just find out whoever's left and get the new ones coming in, and then start up a new campaign again with everyone having a brand new contract and ready to fight. Like historically, there's never been a time in America where we've said outside of wartime, yes, let's pretty much force everyone to be in the military for a year. And because that's been the precedent in America, it seems to be a little bit un-American to start saying nowadays we're going to force everyone into military service for 1 year as a mandatory measure. It's a volunteer force. And also on top of that, having everyone around in the military for a year, we're shifting the military from being a contract-only force to now a conscript-based force, which means that the quality of the soldiers is far lower than it would be otherwise. And then we find ourselves in a situation a lot like the Russians. I also think that that is very low for morale, because most of these people don't want to even be in the military for a year. It's not what they want to do. Most people wouldn't want to. So what kind of morale would there be in the military at that point if everyone doesn't want to be there and they're being forced to be there for a year? And also, another thing is that kind of removes the entire idea to me that an American citizen is free to do what they wish, because it's like, yeah, you're free, but then we're going to make it clear that the government really has a lot of control and say over you, peasant, by forcing you to get in the military for a year, whether you want to or not. Like that really makes it seem like you're not really a free individual. It's just that you're free through the benevolence of the government, but if the government ever really wants to, even if it is an emergency, they can just tell you what to do and tell you shut up and you're going to like it, go get in the military for a year. There's a decent amount of things that I don't like with it. And I'm one of the people who, in high school, I was shooting to get into the military until I had scoliosis that was bad enough that the recruiters treated me like tainted goods. And even still, being someone who would have liked to have been in the military, I don't think it's good to really try and force people into the military, even if it's for a year. But with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Adam McLean, who puts in a 10. And thank you, Adam, as well for that support. He said, I ain't gotta, but I thought I should because I can, and I'm glad I can.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Doug Halstead, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Doug, as well for the support. He said, for the Potash Pronunciation Fund, LOL, and keep up the good work.
Hey, thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this possible. We wouldn't be so punished. But still, thank you once again. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Glock Glock, who's there, LSA, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Mr. Glock, for that support. It's the Corgi Fund. Love you guys, and LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for supporting the Corgi Fund. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it running. So a big thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Two Hot Dog Guys, One Cup of Snow, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Two Hot Dog Guys, One Cup of Snow, for that support. They said, the real McCoy. What do you know about Elijah J. McCoy, a big part of progression of steam engines, and also in the local questionable asylum Eloise, a very interesting history of its own.
Elijah McCoy. I've heard that name before, and I'll have to pull him up. Elijah McCoy. Dang, I cannot. Let's see. Wait a minute. Oh my God. I do know. Okay, he was the one who created the lubrication system for the roller bearings on the axles of the rail cars, and that's where the phrase "the real McCoy" comes from, because there was a whole bunch of knockoffs that came out later on in time, but Elijah McCoy was the guy who created the original version that actually was incredibly good and very high quality. And so railroaders working on the railroads would say, when seeing a boxcar or any kind of rail car like that, that was the real McCoy, and that's where the phrase came from. But yes, I do know this guy, and he is really the reason why trains were able to become a lot longer and a lot more effective towards the latter end of the 19th century, is because you didn't have to worry about roller bearings on every single axle overheating out of the blue, because lubrication systems were a lot more effective thanks to this fellow right here. He's a huge reason why railroading is what it is today. But still, thank you so much for support. I had to see his name, and I had to see like a quick little synopsis to remember a little bit about him, but still an amazing guy in the terms of railroading and technological innovation. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Uncovered Cube, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Uncovered Cube, for that support. They said, do you think America forces Ukraine into a ceasefire and allows Putin to rebuild just to attack again in 4 years? And can we pass the blame again?
You can always pass the blame. That's what everyone does these days. But beyond that, I do have to say I don't really know if that would be the objective. I'm not entirely sure. Only time will tell what the true objective of this whole deal was. From what I'm hearing, apparently the president has an obsession with getting a Nobel Peace Prize, which I really don't know why, because, like, it's like we've gotten awards in our lives, and I really don't give a damn about any of them. So I don't know why the Nobel Peace Prize apparently means so much to him. But apparently that's what he's trying to do it for. But anyways, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Peter Florence, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Peter, for the 5. He said, good evening, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt.
Hey, good evening to you. And thank you so much for giving us support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Kachulian343, who puts in a 5 and says they can't lose the Kursk front. It's too important strategically, and it's a massive hit to Russian morale and a boost for Ukraine's and big bargaining power.
Thank you for the support. I would actually have to say, in terms of strategic value, it's a fairly insignificant kind of a thing, in my opinion. But in the other aspects, there may be a good point there. And maybe I'm wrong on the strategic value of it, and I just don't see it. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Just Chillin' once again, who puts in a 5 and says, that's all, folks.
And son of a gun. Yeah, you thought I was gonna say son of a bitch. But beyond that, thank you so much for the support. I know this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Clayton Wilkie, who put in a 5. And thank you very much, Clayton, for that support and helping to keep the channel running. We also had a 5 from David Oliver, who says, what is this North Korea declares war about? Slav Ukraine, Hiram Slava.
Hey, thank you so much for the support. Can you reread that one again, please?
They said, what is this about North Korea declaring war? What's that about?
Oh, well, they're threatening war. They're not declaring war. They're just threatening it again, like they always do. It was explained earlier on the stream. Sadly, I can't give a synopsis now because we are well over time. But still, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Octavian Timarasanu, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Octavian, for that support. They said Israel is currently taking more Syrian territory. Could this be part of their plan to relocate the Palestinian population in Gaza? And thoughts?
Possibly. I don't think so. I think it's more so other interests in mind with that. But I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've got a 5 from Vulture1066 once again, and thank you very much, Vulture, for the support. They said, you helped me get balanced news. Keep it up, 1-4-cha.
And thank you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying the balanced news coverage on this channel and helping it to keep on running so that way we can keep on giving it. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Brian Gonzalez, who says, any credibility to the rumors that unlikely allies, Turkey and Poland, team up to help Ukraine?
They're not really unlikely allies in this instance with Ukraine. They actually have a common interest there. In everything else, most likely not. But in this one, they're actually allies through and through. But I think they may actually team up to help out the Ukrainians because both of them are very invested in the security and well-being of the state of Ukraine long-term into the future. And so with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. Thank you once again for support. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Blazoth, who put in a 3, along with Marc-Andre Burnett for also putting in a 3. And then we had a 2 from Eric Horner, LSA, as well as a 2 from Preds fan, Myrtle Beach. And we had a 1 from Misha DeBear. And it's a huge shout out to all 5 of you, actually, Blazoth, Mark, Eric, Preds, and also Misha for that support and helping to keep the channel running. And we have one last super chat here, and this one goes to Scott SDP, who put in a 2, and says, I really enjoy the show.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for greatly enjoying the show, because we enjoy having you here, and we enjoy every single one of y'all being here, including the 4.6 thousand people who, crazily enough, are still here 3 hours and 43 minutes after the stream started. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, I understand that we're moving on to the live chats. Unfortunately, I hate to say this almost every night. I feel like this is almost the way it is every single time. We have run out of time, and we are currently over time. We will be getting 3 live chat questions, however, and the Morse code deciphers of the stream, and then we're going to be rounding this thing out. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, tonight the Morse code deciphers of the stream was the entire one, the entire roster, that is. Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, Roy Fluffiness, Arabelle Gerbo, Joni Dog, and Norm Pritchett. They said the Morse code says for today, the news and the world was a pretty crazy place today, but now we are getting to see it. LLT, LSA.
And that's the sound of money, and y'all just got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate y'all for that, because y'all have gotten that correct for 1,108 days of the war, and continue to get that correct time and time again. And so a big shout out to y'all. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And we have one more super chat to get to. This one goes to Famaz, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Famaz, for that 10. And thank you for pointing it out to me as well. These days, we're getting so many super chats, and the stream's running so late, I'm starting to miss them as my brain gets tired at the very end. But thank you very much, Famaz, for the support. He said, I'm concerned Russia may crash oil prices post-war as targeted retaliation using stockpiled crude from damaged refineries. OPEC crashed prices to minus 37 in 2020 to cause chaos in the West and have fears.
That's a very interesting concern, actually a pretty interesting one, and I hope that they wouldn't do something like that, because then we would probably have to start sanctioning Russian oil again and just stop them from ever putting it out there onto the world market because of their acts of bad faith, I'd suppose. But that is still fairly concerning when you put it that way. And so with that, thank you for the support from us and helping this channel to keep on running, and of course, very sorry that we missed that. And so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, so this one is going to go to, let's see here. Let me pick one that is new that we haven't covered really yet in the super chat. Let's see here. This one goes to Slow Genius, who says, is Poland's mobilization just mandatory training for all able-bodied men or a full draft into the military?
It's really just more so training and mobilization, so that way later on, like, basically this is how it's working. They're planting the seeds to reap the harvest later on. So what they're going to do is that they're going to get these people in, they're going to train them, and then they're going to put them back out into the world. You know, training will be given, really basic, the most basic training. There probably won't be any job training or specialist training. And then they'll send them back out into the populace. And then if a war happens later, these people already have a decent amount of training and experience under their belts, at least the basic level, so they can move these guys immediately into job training or push them immediately into service a lot faster than it would be otherwise. Meaning that the Polish military could mobilize at a far faster rate during the war than other countries that wouldn't have that kind of advantage. So that's really what they're doing right now, from what I understand. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Snowy. And Snowy said, even if the sanctions against Russia are lifted, how likely is it that their economy will still falter?
It's probably decently likely. Once an economy starts to spiral like Russia's has, it's really hard to pull it back out, even if they are allowed out into the open world. As a matter of fact, if they're allowed back out into the open world, foreign competitors entering the Russian market may begin to destroy the already fragile companies that are left inside of Russia, and that may lead to a complete domestic economic implosion, and then lead Russia to be completely reliant on foreign goods to be able to survive from that point on. That could be a decent likelihood. But I'm not entirely sure, because I'm not exactly a really well versed in the history of how that's worked in the past for countries that have been in a similar position. I generally have heard that it seems to be a half and half on that, so there's about a 50-50 chance that that could happen. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this one goes to Jenkins, USA, who says, if America pulls out of NATO, doesn't that imply that Russia has free reign on the EU?
It really doesn't, because Britain and France are still nuclear armed, and it's not really like they're completely defenseless, and also Europe has a military combined that is larger than Russia's and has far more military funding than Russia's. So technically, really, it doesn't really leave them open to anything. It's just that the United States, which is half of NATO, isn't there, but still half of NATO is still stronger than Russia. So they should be fine on their own. It's just that that's not really that's not like an ideal kind of a situation. That's really the worst case scenario. But they'll still be fine for the large part on their own. But still, I hope that does address that well, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again for having been here tonight, having enjoyed this stream, all 65,000 of y'all who watched before the stream ended. I also have to say, Then I got to thank the 9.6 thousand people who are here at the peak. And I've got to thank everyone who's still here with us right now. We will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, thank you all for another great stream once again tonight. And of course, we will see you all tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern for another night of War News streams. And I'm sure that the news will be no exception. Tomorrow will probably be insane and crazy. And one of these days, I imagine we will be hearing the popping off of a major situation with Iran. And that's just simply a matter of time at this point. So we got big things coming down the pipeline. But also, big shout out to Trism666, who just threw in a $25 donation and said, thank you for your hard work, good night, and LSA. And thank you, Trism, for supporting the channel once again and throwing that in there right before we ended. And we appreciate that. And that is going to actually segue us right out. So with that, folks, be sure to join us again tomorrow at maybe midday for a short war video as well. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroes Slava, get some rest, and good night.